like I was saying before, the divide between people that are into art for money and into art for love is a false divide. That I think that in a way, most of the people that collect art early on are by definition speculating,
Right.
because what they're speculating on is everyone, even people that are multi-billionaires that at least say that would never sell anything, although other people do sell things too. But even someone, maybe you found the one person who never sell anything, but they're still speculating on, they want to catch the thing before it's exciting. They're by definition speculating on what's going to be the hot next thing.
Right.
They love the feeling of being like, oh, Mark Rochon? I bought that before anyone hit. He was still making signs back in, whatever. He was doing sign painting. He was running his own gallery, and I bought one for $4,000. Now, true, at the time I was worth $100 billion, but I bought one for $4,000 before anyone. They love that. That's speculation.
Exactly.
So anyway, so what I say is like, there's no divide, but I'm like, if you want to make artwork, I'm like, hey, check it out. I found the solution. I've cracked it. I can tell you exactly how, and I've seen it happen in real life in my own house, how you can make something that's foolproof from someone selling it. Okay, check it out. I bought this Henry Taylor painting. I've had it for years and years. The gallery that showed it isn't even open anymore. I could sell it any day now, and people have asked me multiple times, hey, would you sell that for $1 million? And I haven't. You know why? Because I love it.
I'm Sean Green, founder and CEO of ARTERNAL. Over the course of the last decade plus, I've been building relationships in this opaque world of fine art. Primary focus, selling software. I've made a lot of friends along my journey. Some of them you'll know, others you'll meet. Come step into the art world with me and my friends. Thank you for carving out the time to be able to sit down with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate the hospitality, and welcome to step into the art world, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, and welcome to my apartment.
Amazing. How long you been here?
I've been in this apartment about a month and a half. I'm pretty new. And actually, I've been away a lot of that time because I went to Art Basel in Miami and to Mexico City since then. So I'm kind of just moving in. So thanks for your christening the place with me. So
nice. This is great. This is great. I'm excited for this conversation. As our viewers know, we like to talk about the personal journey, professional journey, and then most important, and we believe most impactful, the journey through the lens of fine art and collecting, and dropping gems so that people can take away from your experience both in life and in art. We like to start with the streets that raised you. Where were you raised? Where did you live?
I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and I grew up in Somerville, Massachusetts, and then Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I'm an East Coast person through and through. And actually, until I was almost 30, I had never lived anywhere but the East Coast. I grew up in Boston. I went to school in Rhode Island, and then I moved to New York. So I'm an East Coast U.S. person.
Right. And we met in LA several years ago.
Yeah, I remember meeting you actually. Do you remember where we met? We met like outside of an opening walking. We were both like walking to it was outside of Gogh.
Yep.
And you were with a bunch of people that I knew, but honestly, they were kind of like, the world of art is small, and especially there, I don't want to start the show by paying you too many compliments, but you recognize when you meet someone who in a good way, like you were like more interesting and charismatic than the average, most of the rest of the people that were meeting at the people. So I was like, this guy's interesting. What's this guy's deal? So I remember meeting you well.
Yeah. No, it's funny because I was like, does Jeff remember? Because I was like, let me think, because it was pre-pandemic. It was like probably like 2019, 2020,
yeah.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do remember that, and we were headed to I think the dinner after or something like that after Gagosian. So we're here in the collection.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And as someone w's known you for years, I'm not only am I glad you're here, I'm proud of you. You're doing this. It's a great thing.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, man. So I don't know. Should I just start? I'll walk you through some things that that are here that I love. I'll say it's interesting. I just moved into this apartment and just a month or so ago, and all the art that was going to the foundation in Mexico City that opens in less than 2 months left. So actually, this is a new hang of things that aren't going to Mexico City. So a lot of things that I love, like actually, for example, this is the last painting that's going. I just kept this because I wanted this over the fireplace.
Right.
But in a month, this will go to Mexico City too. And then this other painting by Leonor Fini that will take its place over the fireplace. That's kind of like it's in like the on deck circle. You know what I mean? That's,
Right.
it's waiting on deck. And yeah, this is Leonore Fini. She's an artist I love. She's often called a woman surrealist, but even though she probably would have not wanted to be thought of as a woman artist, and she wasn't really a surrealist. She knew the other surrealist painters, but this, these paintings are really, if you look, this subject, this is her. So it's really a self-portrait, and interestingly, it's the same lady. You see, it's like they're both her. It's the same, and this is a Romeo and Juliet painting, but it's her reinterpretation. So she was known for inversing the gaze instead of the like a gaze of men at women. This is often she'll have women looking like she'll have like a fully clothed woman looking at like a very pretty like man with his like shirt off, and she's switched the gaze. Right. But this is a reverse Romeo and Juliet where she's clearly the main character. She's in control, and this pretty guy, you can see he got really tight pants and his butt's like his butt's kind of poking out. He's the one with the he's kind of the confused sex object, and she's the alpha. Right. But it's also just a beautiful painting. She's someone I love. I saw
the work in London at LGD.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah, which is really cool. And then also at the Independent.
When they had the whole booth of her. Yeah. That was amazing. That was my favorite art fair booth I've probably ever seen. Love that. Because that was a whole booth. It was art fair booth. It could have been a museum show,
It's interesting because sometimes I'm like, how do you get to that level where you're purchasing something from a gallery like a Gaussian or a Hauser and Wirth or things like that? And what does that journey need to look like? When I'm having conversations, some people are like, oh man, I can't afford to buy art. But like you can get in at buying, $500 or work for $500 and things like that. What was around you growing up art-wise? And where did you ever think that you would collect?
Never even crossed my mind. And also I had no real connection to art in general. I mean, I'd say in a lot of ways, to me, one of the, you can probably guess, I mean, I like a lot of things they're doing professionally and creatively. I'm a fan of your technology product, but also I like that you're one of the other people who's trying to build a place that can get more people into art, because that's my mission too, is bringing more people into art and art to more kinds of people. Because to me, I'm a good example. I grew up highly educated. Both my parents have PhDs. They're both, I grew up, like I was raised by my mother, but I grew up knowing my father too. They both were professors at different times. I grew up in a, coastal elite city like Boston, and I grew up reading and being exposed to culture. And yet I never had ever met a professional artist, a gallery person, a person who worked in a museum. And really I had no concept that the art world existed. In fact, I didn't even know there was a phrase art world. Really, I mean, I'd been to a museum before a couple times growing up, probably like with a school trip or whatever. Right. And it just seemed to me, as far as I could tell, art was dead people in museums. I didn't even cross my mind that there would be a whole world of people not just producing really interesting art right now, but also making a living, having it be their whole profession. And it didn't even cross my mind to be involved in art, or especially the idea that I could be an artist, even though I liked art. I remember drawing, like with friends, we'd draw cartoons and stuff, but I wasn't one of the best drawers. So I just never even crossed my mind I could be an artist. I didn't know there was conceptual art. I didn't know that I could build a sculpture with, I just thought, well, I like drawing, but I'm not the best drawer. Definitely not going to be Van Gogh or Picasso, so it never even crossed my mind. So I really only bumped into the world of art purely by accident. And as an adult, I was already in my late 20s before I ever encountered anything about this world.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, we have a similar path like that because I knew nothing about art. I stumbled into it by chance with a friend of mine, Zaina, who was quitting her job and becoming an artist full time. I was like, what's a full-time artist? You know what I mean? Like,
and how old were you then?
I was late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, so you were already a full-grown adult.
Full-blown adult.
Before you ever encountered art. Yeah. And that's the thing I always think about a bunch is I'm like, if it's me, and like I encountered so many different things in the world, I knew professional philosophers before I knew professional artists. It's that foreign to so many people, even people that I wasn't deprived of culture in any way. So it just shows how obscure the world is, but it doesn't need to be that way. That's what's weird about it. There's nothing about visual art that makes it so that only a few people can understand it. I don't believe that at all. So anyway, and once you were exposed to it, did it take a while before you really felt like you could be part of it, or did you know, okay, this can be my thing?
I was like insatiably curious. So I was wondering, like, people were like, oh, you should go to galleries, right? And museums. And I was just like, well, when and where? Like, I was asking the most green questions to figure out how, to do it. And there was this lady, Anne de Villepoix in Toronto, where I was raised. And she was like my fairy art godmother, like older lady who was, taking me through and guiding my hand. And like, this is an interesting art world couple who are navigating, because it's like, who is this guy and this lady? But she was like my guiding hand and helping me understand how to navigate, this art world, which you do need that sort of guide, or the hand holding, or the person, who can help you understand the space, because it has very opaque aspects to it.
If anything, I feel like that's a commonality. How I would describe it in a way is some of what we're both doing is, I want to speak for you, but I would say from the outside, like in a way, in the worlds we encountered of art, you needed a one-on-one person to bring you as your guiding hand. And we were both lucky that we bumped into people who would kind of bring us along a bit, but so many people don't have that. So to me, some of what we're both doing is we're trying to be that person, even for people we don't know. You know what I mean? And also, what I say is partly, people are like, why do you make these videos and stuff? Like, what do you get out of it? And partly it's just, I want to be, as corny as it might sound, I want to be I always wish I had a mentor, and I had a couple early on. Like, there's one guy, especially, he was my first art related friend. He was an artist I met, Slater Bradley, and he was nice enough to bring me to a couple things, invite me to an opening. And without him, I never would have known that there was a Gallery World or opening to go to. Dirk Schraber is another artist. He was the second artist I met, and those two guys were friends, and they invited me to openings, and they invited me to an all artist poker game. So they were kind of my fairy god brothers, and fairy god mentors. But then I never, in terms of, they're both artists, so they showed me a bit of how the world works and kind of let me do my thing. But I always wished I had a mentor in terms of the parts of art that I got into, learning about art, collecting, being part of museums, things like that. I never had a mentor. So I always wished I did, like some older person that would just be like, here, son, let me show you how it's done. So that's what I try to be to people, even just to strangers on the internet.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned artists, because when I got to New York, I was meeting a guy named Steve Miller, who became my co-founder in what's known as ARTERNAL today. And Steve, he was the second person who actually opened what, the Mecca, New York's art world, right? And I was like, wow, the way in which people move and see past you, actually. The people look past you before they actually, want to tap in and understand who you are. And that's another element of this space that you gotta, have a bit of from my perspective, have a bit of thicker skin for, before people actually warm up to you.
Yeah. I mean, but let's just, state some of the obvious. One of the wild things about art is that you see, the world is already filled with things that set people apart by obvious things, or things that are people are often divided by, like race. But even in art, what's funny is, like, I'm a white guy and I still have people look through me. In art, I'm a Ivy League educated white guy and people don't take me seriously in art. You know what I mean? So it's like, you see that, like, I can only imagine, what to say is, like, I can only imagine, why I bring that up is, I'm like, if people look through me, I know that means there's so many people that don't even get looked at all, and so yeah, I can only imagine, I imagine I can understand that a lot of people were looking through you when you when you showed up.
Oh yeah.
And we know it doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly. Steve would leave me in a room, so I'd be, you're like I could find you. Like, it's like a decade ago, before the art world started to, open up a bit.
But a decade later, it's not that, let's be honest, it's not that different.
Very true.
Not yet, but we're going to change it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, yeah. Yeah, this is Henry Taylor. It's the first painting I ever bought from a gallery, and it's something that I feel really close to, and I have all kinds of life experience with it, including people always like, why does he spell rhythm wrong? And I was like, I don't know. Maybe they're like, maybe it's like it's a mystery. And I've never actually asked him about it. But someone told me that I can't remember if it was Tim or Jeff from Blown Bow said that they what happened was because he paints in a very I don't know what the word is. He has his own process where he's following his own muse painting to painting, and he leaves paintings just on the floor, on whatever, and he's picking them up, finishing them at different times. And then right down to the end of the show, they said, okay, Henry, we're picking up the paintings. Now we got to figure out what's in the show. And he said, okay, let's put this one. So they say, oh, yeah, it's a great painting. Let's do that one. But it didn't have the text, and they were taking it off to be stretched and out of the studio. And he said, wait, keep that for a second. And there was some friend of his in the set, and he asked his friend, like, hey, Steve, what's so-and-so say? Like, what's Big Mike say? And he was like, what do you mean what's Big Mike say? Like, what's that line that Big Mike says? He said, oh, he says syllable times rhythm equals mumbo jumbo. He said, oh yeah, we could paint real quick. And he painted it as they were holding it to take it out.
Wow.
So, which doesn't mean he spelled it wrong by accident, but he at least painted it quickly. And you can tell, I can't remember who was, Spencer Lewis, I think, or some friend who was an artist, I'm thinking it was Spencer, came over and I told him that story, and he looked at it super closely and he said, you can tell the text is painted, it had already dried. And the text, there's like a layer of paint, and then he painted the pink text on top of it. So,
what was young Jeff like, as he was like growing up, paint that picture.
I mean, I guess the things that are still relevant to what I'm interested in. I mean, I suppose we're all kind of just like the way that we were when we were a kid. When I was a kid, I was always writing things. I always loved words and ideas. I was always writing and trying to figure out the words for things and trying to understand. Maybe it's especially also just trying to understand the way the world works. I've always been the kind of person, like as a little kid, if I got a toy, I try to take it apart and put it back together again. Like I want to see I'm a kind of like insatiable learner, and even I probably was like a stubborn little kid, and maybe to this day, where I didn't want to be told what to learn. Even in college, for example, I read a lot in college, but it was all the stuff that not what they told me to read. They'd be like, read this and this. I'm like, I'm not reading what you tell me to read. I'm gonna read what I want to read, and then read all the other stuff. So I was probably like that as a kid too. I was like a very self-motivated and maybe kind of stubborn, independent learner. And I was always, and I'd have a different. I don't know, my mother would say I'd have a different, like as a little kid, I'd be obsessed with something. I want to know everything about dinosaurs. And then I'd learn everything I could about, and I'd be, my mom would try to say, I don't know what, like go eat your lunch. And I'd be talking about dinosaurs. I would just be completely one-track minded focus. And then I'd be on to something else, astronauts. And then I'd be learning about astronauts, So in a way, I'd say that, what's cool about art, especially about, maybe this is taking the conversation to a much later question, but one of the things I feel most strongly about within art is there's a role for everybody. That art is a lot more than just making the art for sure is probably, it's got to be the most important part if there's a most important part, but all the other parts are important, including how we all understand it. And a lot of what I wanted to do instinctively as a kid is just understand how things work, and talk about and think about, why things were happening the way, like I wanted to understand the world and so I could, I think part of the reason why you take something apart and put it back together is to see how it works so you can build it better, and so maybe that's my instinct as a kid. And I feel like one of the best things about art, and by art I don't just mean one individual artwork, but the kind of spectrum of the whole field of art, is that in a way it's something that there are a lot of things you can learn about and then you're at the end.
Right.
But art has no beginning or end, really. It's a kind of limitless field to learn about, and it's always changing. So in a way, some of it is like a field of knowledge, like a test you'd study for, or a game you'd play, or but unlike those things, there's no answer. There's no, So if you are a self-motivated learner, it gives you endless space to just keep learning. And I think you're really well served. One of the things that I found, in my life and art, the thing that served me the best is that I do it, even though I think the more you learn, the more it helps you. If you have to learn because it's like a homework assignment, you'll never learn. You know what I mean? You'll never learn all that you'd want to learn.
You think it's homework
because you think it's homework. You know what I mean? So it really serves you to. I remember in one of the fields that I worked in, I met one of the at some point I was betting on sports games for a living, and I met the kind of Babe Ruth of sports betting, and I asked him for advice. He's much older. Maybe it's part of like looking for a mentor.
Right.
And he said, "You want to know the secret of being the best sports bettor in the world?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Outwork the other guy. That's the secret. Outwork the other guy." And I thought that was interesting because I realized, in a way, in art, the thing that served me is I outwork everybody. I outwork everybody in learning. I hustle harder to see things, learn things, than anyone I've ever met. But I do it for one main reason, which is I love it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm just hungry to learn and know everything. And so that lets me outwork people who are just kind of phoning it in. So sometimes I'll meet people, even who, I don't know, they're a gallery or dealer who represents an artist, and they're like, how'd you read that? And I haven't, but it's sort of like they're, in some cases they're like kind of clocking in and clocking out, whereas it's not even my job, but I'm not doing it because it's a job. I'm doing it because I just can't help but figure it all out, because I want to, what I mean? It's not because anyone told me to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was probably like that when I was
funny. Like I share, it's almost identical, because as I'm researching this space and building tech in this space, I'm like, I have to know it better than everybody else. And you have to understand, it's like this anthropological approach that I take. I'm like, you have to understand the human behaviors and how people are doing what they're doing. And if you understand that better than anybody else, then you can be able to take care of them and build software and allow them to be able to engage and use it. It's the way in which your approach is it feels like me, but from a different vantage.
And I can tell you're thinking about it all the time too, which is hard. I feel like it's hard to be the best at something that you don't love enough to eat, sleep, and breathe. But if you can eat, sleep, and breathe it, and I recognize, there are people I meet in art. Sometimes I meet people where I'm like, wow, this person really eats, sleeps, and breathes this stuff. And that they're the people that are the best at it, not because they're smarter or born more talented, but just because they're more focused. Yeah.
Right. You brought up some gaming from gambling. Where did that come from? I know there's some poker action and things like that. Where did that come from? And who, like, at some point because I know Jonas Wood has a poker game right now that we see each other at.
Yeah.
But like, how did that enter your life?
I mean, I guess I've always, as long as I remembered, I've loved games, and I think it was part of growing up, living more at my mother's house than my father's, but then I'd go stay at my father's house, and he loved to play chess. So I'd play chess with him starting when I was maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old. And it was something we could do together. And I just remember, I mean, for better or worse, that's, I guess, maybe one of the ways that I was as a kid, and I still am now. Although I feel like I've calmed it down a little bit. I was really competitive, especially with people. I guess it's like natural being like a son with your father, but I was like, I'm gonna beat my father at chess. I just was determined. I'm gonna beat this guy, especially because I could tell he thought he was good. He was like, son, I'm pretty good at this. I was like, we'll see who's good at this. You know what I mean? I just felt that instinct. Even when I was 4 years old, I was like, I'm going to beat this guy. And I'm going to, maybe just in some ways I wanted to like show him that, I don't know what, that I was capable or something like that, the way that fathers and sons kind of feel.
Right.
So I was just determined to get good. But then I'd, like any time I had like a little bit of, I mean, money's not the right word, but like any like little bit of, when I was in like middle school, I would do like odd jobs, and then I'd use all the money to buy books about chess, and then I'd carry them around with me everywhere. In a way that was kind of embarrassing in retrospect, I mean, or maybe at the time, but I would have like a backpack full of chess books and bring it with me everywhere I went. and study chess. So I was really into chess, and I played chess in tournaments. And then when I was in middle school, I guess I encountered the game Magic the Gathering. Are you familiar with Magic the Gathering? And then I went from playing in chess tournaments to being on the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour. And then actually I played in a Magic tournament, like a national tournament, where the prize was college scholarship money. So I actually paid for my first year of college playing playing Magic the Gathering.
Wow.
And then from that, people I knew playing Magic, some of those people started playing online poker. And so I was in college. I owed still close to $100,000 in student loan debt. And someone introduced me to online poker, and I said, I'm gonna start playing online poker. And I remember he told me, he was like, I don't think you should start playing poker. And I said, why? And he said, well, do you have the money to play? And I said, no, I have $50, you know? And he said, well, what happens if you lose that $50? I said, I don't know, I don't have any money. You know what I mean? But I just was in school. I had loans. I ate at the school cafeteria. And he said, I don't think you should use your money to play poker. For starters, it's a lot of losing. You know, the thing about poker is, like, there's a lot of luck in any given, maybe not in a year or a lifetime, but any given month even, you just have a lot of, no matter how good you are, you lose sometimes because there's a lot of luck and variance in the results. You can't control the results. And some of it, you make the perfect move, even if you're ahead, and then the wrong card comes and you lose. And you have to just suck it up and deal with it somehow. You have to learn to deal with losing all the time, even while you're winning, and like heartbreaking losses. And I said, yeah, so what? He said, you're too emotional, man. You really should not play. You're not going to be able to take it well. I recommend not playing. But of course, I didn't listen to him, and I put my $10 at a time. I put money into playing online poker, and then and I remember I lost for a while, and the first 3 times I put $10 in, and I remember walking to a class in school and thinking, why did I think that I could be a gambler? Like, I'm not a gambler. I never gambled on anything, and I am too emotional, and I'm really taking it hard losing. And then I put my last $10 in, and by the end of the year, I paid off my student loans. So then I said, whoa, I guess I'm a professional poker player now. And I started, and it all happened really fast.
Wow.
You know, like I remember I was bored in a English lecture in college, and I took I had like a little, like this, like, you know, however long this was ago, where the laptop would get really like hot on you have to turn it off every. I had like a jank laptop that would get hot, but I took it and I was just bored, so I went into the bathroom and plugged into the internet and sat in a stall and played with the laptop on my lap, like burning my knees. And before the class was over, I made $10,000. So I was like, man, it's gonna be hard to go to the next class. I'm like, this is too. Coming out of school, I became an accidental professional poker player, and I've always been a musician and songwriter.
Right.
So I was making music. I had a group with another guy, but we weren't making a lot of money making music. So I was like, I thought of myself as a musician and writer, but I was earning my living playing cards, partly on the internet. And then I started because when I started, I wasn't 21 yet, so I wasn't allowed to. It's been enough time, right? I'm allowed to say that. Yeah. I think at the time I was illegal when I was playing, but there's some kind of statute of limitations. So, anyway, I was playing. I was underage playing. If anyone's listening, but then once I was 21, I started going to Las Vegas and playing in Las Vegas, and then once I moved to LA, I started playing in a place called the Commerce Casino in Commerce, California, which is its own strange ecosystem. But yeah, so my job was playing cards, and then from that, I met people. I'd always loved baseball, right. And I've made sort of like predictive models about baseball. But then I met a group of people, starting with people that I met playing Magic the Gathering,
wow.
That became a professional sports betting team. We bet on sports together, and then I did that for a couple years until really what made me stop, other than just, well, there were 2 main things that made me stop, but they both had to do with the kind of questionable legality. I believe that as an individual bettor at the time, you weren't breaking the law, but if you were being a casino yourself, you definitely were breaking the law. I was not doing that, but it seemed a little too close to the, things started happening where I thought, okay, I should not be. And what's funny is now, fast forward to now, you can bet legally, and they're
Right.
advertised it during the, like I lived every day in fear that someone would think that I was a bookie and not a bettor,
Right.
and they'd come knock on my door. And now every day you're watching basketball and they say bet online, whatever. So which is crazy. But yeah, so that was my job until I quit that too.
Right.
This is Neptune by Guercino. It's the beginning of my Old Master life, and it's a painting that I love. It's fun seeing it under so much light too. He and I think partly maybe the quest I'm on with Old Masters is to realize that some of these paintings from these time periods, I think this is from the 1640s, that they can live in contemporary settings and with other contemporary art. But I feel like that's not true of every Old Master painting. Some paintings feel more contemporary and others don't. And to me, this felt super, the fact that it's like one figure, he's super alive with this kind of background. It could be, I don't know, it lives in a contemporary way. And the fish is almost more alive than he is. The fish is the real star. The fish is the real star of the show. This is Magdalena Frimkes, as is this. There's a lot of this too. Mm-hmm. She's one of my favorite artists in the whole world. Maybe I should have put her on my top 5. I keep thinking of more people to. Magdalena Frimkes, retroactive top 5. Kick someone else out. Sorry, Picabia. No, I'm just kidding. But I love Magdalena and Michael Frimkes, her husband, who was her husband and partner. Rest in peace, Michael. He just died, I think, less than a year ago. Mm-hmm. This is Condorito. It's a character from Spanish language cartoons, but this is almost like a film strip. This was just got back from the show at LACMA. It was in the and it's her painting a cartoon figure on a ceramic, but it's also like one of these moving like a film strip in motion. And what else is here? Oh, this is a painting from 1895 by Edouard Vuillard.
Wow.
He's like another one about them. I also left him out of the list, but I love Vuillard, and he was part of Les Nabis, the Nabis, that was a group of Bonnard, Vuillard, Maurice Denis. They were rethinking how to look. So this is sort of like it's his grandmother at the sink washing a thing, but it's also an experiment with light because she's just covered in light. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of these, they were nabis, they were seers, they were seeing in a new way.
So while you were engaged in what I call a risky biz, you learned a lot, I'm sure. What are some of those learnings that you take from, poker, gambling, when it comes to art and collecting?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I got so many answers to that. I mean, for starters, I'd say it actually did handicap me a bit when I got into art, because I could tell right when my first experiences with art were just not even knowing how the world worked and trying to understand who was who. I always think of my first friend invited me to an opening, and my thought was, man, do I need to have a tuxedo or something? I thought it was gonna be like the Oscars, and or something like that. I didn't know what it was, I thought it would have to be like
super
formal. And then I got there and it was all people in like ripped jeans, like with the drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon and whatever. It was like opening at Team Gallery in New York, and then I remember him saying to me, he said, man, like I hope the show sells well. I don't see a lot of collectors here. And I remember looking around and thinking, trying to figure out who the collectors would be. I didn't really have a guess at what a collector would look like, So I was thinking, I'm like seeing something like, I wonder who the collectors are. And he was like, I see a couple here, but not a lot. And then I call him over. I said, oh, dude, I think I see a collector here. This is probably good. There's like a really rich looking lady, and she has like a floor length fur coat on. He said, where? I said, look right over there. And he said, dude, that's my mom. But I remember being like, oh, because that was my idea of that's what a collector looked like,
right.
But then I'd say that same thing kind of handicapped me, because when I started getting into art, I was trying to start to buy a bit of art. I didn't have a big budget, but I had enough to buy a little bit of art. Mm-hmm. And but I could tell immediately I wasn't anyone's idea of a collector, even people that I met. And I was young. I didn't I didn't have a Google. It wasn't like I was the founder of Facebook or something like that, where
Right.
people were like, "Oh, get this guy in here. He's, whatever." But also, if they heard that I was a professional gambler, they're like, "Professional gambler? What are you going to do? Is art just a gamble to you? Are you going to just gamble with the art? You think you're going to just treat it like a, which wasn't, which is a weird way of thinking about it in a lot of ways, because I think that, being a professional risk taker, which is part of what I've been, has helped me a lot in art. And also, it's strange to think because like a lot of art is a in every way, every gallery that decides to pay lots of money to do an art fair and hope that their stuff, that they can make back what they invested by flying their whole staff there and doing whatever, is taking a gamble.
Right.
All the businesses are taking calculated, creative financial risk. And it doesn't mean that their booth is just a set of X's and O's to them. Their booth is the artist that they believe in and passionately are developing their careers. And they're taking a big risk by paying all that money to show them each time. Or each time someone decides to open another gallery, move from LA to LA and New York, it's obviously a big gamble to pay that. So the question is, how do you know when your risk is worth taking? These are the things you are figuring out when you make a bet of any kind, and I think that maybe the biggest way that it's helped me in art is that I what's the word? I act. I do things. I actually, I don't just, I can't do everything, and and I definitely can't afford everything. But the things I didn't realize until pretty far along in my art life, how many people just like to blow smoke and they don't actually get off the pot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Acquire.
Choir, and I'd have these kinds of conversations that, like I remember meeting with a guy who's basically like a full-time collector, brilliant, very knowledgeable person about art, and his main thing is art collecting, and I saw him, but we don't, he's the kind of person I see occasionally at an art fair. Is a few years ago, and I saw him, and we were asking him, and partly what's kind of fun is everyone's trying to learn from each other all the time. They're sort of saying like, "Hey, what have you seen? You seen anything good?" Like whatever. People talk to each other because partly you weren't
very social, right?
and you learn from your peers because there's not one central place to learn, right? So you're kind of always asking people, and I'd say this is another thing that I like things that are at the intersection of two, where you get to put two things together, even two things in your personality. And I'd say that on the one, the one thing I've done with people that served me really well, I've talked about this a bunch, is I've been intentionally generous with information. I share. I'm a sharer. And I'm a sharer now online, but even before I did anything online, I was a sharer. And it's, I think, for two very separate reasons. That one, I just like, genuinely, I like giving and taking care of my friends and stuff. I feel like if I have something to give, I want to give it. I like the feeling of, maybe just for selfish reasons, I like the feeling of generosity. But also, I'm strategic. I'm a game player. And I realized that it was really, the way to get great information and knowledge from people is to also give it. No one wants to share knowledge with someone who's stingy. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
It's like being stingy is like, it's hurting the people. I'm like, why are you stingy? It's hurting you. So I saw this guy, and he will ask me, what did you see? And we tell each other, and I'd say, and I said, yeah, I saw this, this artist is really good. He said, oh, I've been seeing that. And he said, dude, I think she's really good. I said, I know, man, really good. And I think she's on the verge of like having a big museum show, big, whatever. And he said, I think so too. And I said, okay, I'm going to try to buy one. And he said, yeah, me too. We left, we talked about other stuff. And then I saw him a year later, and he said, dude, you were right, man. It was a year later, and she has a huge show at the Tate, whatever. I'm like, or she's already in the Tate's collection, this and that. And I said, yeah, you bought one, right? And he said, no, you know what? I thought about it, but I was talking to my wife. She wasn't totally sure. And a couple other people I asked were never heard of her. So I was kind of like, I should wait. And now it's too late. Did you buy one? And I said, yeah, I bought 4, and he said, you bought 4? How'd you buy 4? And I said, how'd you buy 0? We talked about this. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, but I realized he just wasn't used to, like, he's not used to going for it.
Right.
You know, whereas, you know, it's one of the things that kind of serves you well, especially in a game like in chess and poker. You know, in chess, you play, you hit the clock and it's the other person's move and they hit the clock. When the other person hits the clock and it's your move, you got to make a move. You know what I'm saying? You got to make a move, but you can't just be like, oh, let me ask my wife, you know, whatever. You got to do something, you know? And so that doesn't mean that you should always act impulsively and make rash decisions with your money, of course. But I think it's like you've learned to develop your intuition and to trust it enough to even to take a big leap. Because at some point you got to just do something, you know? And you know, what do people say? It's these are the kinds of things that I feel like whenever there have been collector interviews, people kind of lean on some old adages like, you know, if you buy what you like, you could never go wrong or whatever, right? Which some of that's kind of true, but one of the ones that's the closest to true, I think, is people always talk about how they're like, I don't regret anything that I've bought, but I regret all the things that I didn't buy.
Yeah.
Which is a little misleading, right? Because you can't. What are you gonna do? Buy everything then? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have money to buy everything.
It's not possible.
But I do think it's, you know, it serves you well, especially, and I think it's also something, you know, people forget that they're like, all these people out there seem to want to buy the art before it gets more valuable. What about you? Are you one of those people that wants to buy the art before it goes up in value? I'm like, hell yes. I'm like, you know why? Because I can't afford it once it gets, you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to buy it while I can afford it. You know what I mean? So part of the reason why in a world where the prices of everything escalate so fast and everything moves so quickly out of range, out of possible, you know, whatever, is that one of the biggest reasons to learn to act quickly is that often, sure, buying something that you find out you don't love later you can regret it, but even more, you're maybe more likely to regret something you didn't do and now you can do it, but at 50 times the price.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's then, you know, so for me, I'm trying to be really decisive and take the opportunities to be part of things that I love while I can afford them. And I'm super conscious of, that's the other thing maybe that helps from gambling is that when people ask, what are you trying to do in art with your collecting? Like what's your, they're expecting me to say something like, oh, you know, I'm Austrian, so I'm focusing on Austrian artists of my parents' generation from 1921 to 1926 with a focus on whatever. Right. I don't feel that way at all. I like all kinds of periods and types of art, but I have instead I have a mission, a challenge, I don't know what you call it, an MO, that defines my art loving and buying. It's this simple. I'm trying to buy the best, most loved by me. It doesn't have to be the best, you know, in someone else's eyes. I'm interested to know what you like. I respect your opinion, whatever, but I don't mean the best, like, you know, the most valuable or the most in the most museums. I mean the things that I think are the best, whatever I'm basing it on, what I like the most and whatever, the best art that I possibly can with the finite budget that I have. So, you know, there are lots of artists that I really like. You know, if someone says, you know, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example. You know, don't you love Agnes Martin? I do actually really like Agnes Martin, but I'll never own one because I can't afford it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, that's the reality. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, you know, so, and I'm also trying to counteract this sort of feeling of when people talk about art, they almost talk about it. Everyone comes in trying to be like, I'm the wealthiest and most important person ever. You know, I mean, whatever. I'm so important. I'm so wealthy. Budget is nothing for me. I'm really just focused on what I like, you know, whatever. And, or people talk about it as if they give advice to people as if those people had an infinite budget. Whereas for me, I'm really clear from the outset, I do not have an infinite budget. I started with a very small budget and I have more budget now, but it's still really small compared to a lot of other people. And that's just the reality. So, but I'm trying to find the ways, sticking and moving and finding opportunities and looking where people aren't looking, either before they're looking or sometimes after they're looking, to find great things in the cracks. Not because it's all about money or price to me, but because if it's not at a price that I can afford, I can't buy it. So like I'm trying to find those value and because, and I think it confuses people because they think often in art things, people talk about it as if it's one or the other. They think either they're people that love money and only think about money, or they're people that love art. But actually and I was just having this conversation with someone yesterday in a gallery. She was like, I know, look, even the most cold-blooded art market killers that all love art. They all love art. There's no one, I've never met anyone who goes to lots of art events and openings and museums who just only wants to count money and doesn't love art. They all love art. But for me, when I talk about value, it can scare people sometimes. What I mean is there are two things that are great, but one of them is the hottest artist in the world and the painting costs $100 million. I can't afford that, you know? So I'm going to try to find the thing that's also great, but it's people are kind of sleeping on a little bit, and that's going to be my challenge but the net result is it's not like I'll be like I earned 6.324 of value, but what it's going to be is I ended up with a great artwork that I wouldn't have been able to end up with otherwise. And people would think, how would you do that? Do you not, whatever. I'm like, because I didn't buy the 100 million.
Right.
I bought the other thing. That's the that's the value.
Right.
Or I bought this artist before anyone had heard of her, and now she's famous, but I able to get it when I
early.
Yeah, and when I could afford it. So yeah. What else? Oh man, I keep thinking more people that I left out of out of my baby. It's hard to, right? It's hard to make 5.
It's hard to do top 5.
This is Vito Acconci, who's another artist I really love. It's a sculpture, but it's also a chair. It's called name calling chair. It's a rocking chair, but it's got a hole for the place you sit down, and it says a word. You see what it says? It says ASS. You see, it's so made of it's made of a word. And this is another one of my favorite living artists, and I think really one of the great, weirdly still. It's the same in film and music sometimes, and even in your life. It's another thing I'll maybe make a video about. Everyone's always looking for the new XYZ, but sometimes the new thing is actually the thing that's, I even feel like it's a metaphor for love and relationships. It's easy to be, on your Instagram Explore page looking at sexy people, but sometimes the person that you most desire is already right there in your home with you. And in the same way, people always want to find the newest artists, but it's starting to be some of the most underappreciated artists, or artists that are already well known. Just people are sleeping on them because they've been working for so long. And I think Francesco Clemente is one of those people. I think he's one of the greatest artists alive. He's been well known since the 80s, and yet he should be, I think, a lot more appreciated, especially by museums, especially by the market. And I love his work. This is a painting of Renee Fleming, the opera singer, I think. But it's I don't know, it's I kind of like the also experimenting with scale, really big, really little, with a really big painting by Clemente, who I love, and really little painting by Cecily Brown, who's another one of my very favorite artists, and just an incredible painter.
Very cool. And I like how you took us through that journey from one type of the game, right? Or one type of game to the game of collecting. When you were gonna take that first initial leap, budget is, low, as you describe it. What was your criteria then? And then fast forward it to now, where you've probably made some mistakes, had some successes. What does that criteria look like for you today, and defines how you move?
In terms of to buy an artwork?
Yeah.
I guess when I started, I thought I knew what I was doing, and I had all kinds of ideas, but in retrospect, I didn't know anything. But some of it, I just got lucky, if I'm being honest. So, I don't think I had any criteria. I was just showing up. The first people I met in art, apropos of that poker game, I met people in a New York artist poker game. Then I moved to LA, and they introduced me to an LA artist poker game. And in it, I met the first gallery owner that I ever met, Jeff Poe. Right. And he he said you can buy from Blum and Poe, and I remember people being like, "Wow, that's a big deal." I didn't big deal that I can buy. I didn't understand that. I'm like, wait, I'm lucky to be able to give them money. You know what I mean? I'm still we're still kind of I'm like, hold on. He's like, no, it's a great access you have there. And he said you can buy from our shows. So really, I wasn't really using criterion. I just only knew one, and I knew I kind of. And it's how I think a lot of people feel getting into art, where I almost felt like, man, I got to buy stuff to show these people that I can be part of this world. I almost felt like I had to, I was so intimidated that I felt like I needed to spend money quick to show them that I belonged or something, And but so I almost showed up to his gallery being like, sir, you won't waste your time with me. I'm going to show you that I could be an art buyer, He was a lot older than me, and, I wanted to prove to him, or show him that I was worth the time of inviting me there. So I went to the first couple of shows. I didn't really understand what they were. Good artists in retrospect. One of them was Friedrich Kunath, I think. I liked the show, but I didn't quite understand. I didn't feel like a way in to understand how I could. And then there was a show of Henry Taylor, and I went to the show. I really liked the artworks. I still didn't, even think of asking to make the leap to buy one, partly because I didn't know how much they cost. I didn't know anything about it, but I was like, whoa, I really like this. But then they invited me to the dinner afterwards, and it was a small dinner. It was the first art gallery dinner I'd ever been to.
Right.
And it was a small group of people in a restaurant in Venice, California, with like white tablecloths, very California, whatever. And it was kind of a lot of these like older people who were very fancy seeming, but also they all seemed to know each other. I didn't know anyone. And I would just kind of like, I didn't really, and no, I was just there, I didn't know what to say to anyone.
Right.
I'm feeling awkward. And then I think something else happened that was really helped me. Without it, maybe I wouldn't still be around art, which is Henry Taylor was nice enough to instead of he was not just talking to, the chief curator of MoMA and the president of the whatever, Eli Broad or whatever. He also talked to me and was nice to me. And also maybe he could sense that I didn't really know anybody either. So we spent a while talking, and he was super generous and nice to me. And also he just was a really interesting guy. And he kind of seemed like what I'd imagine a great artist would be, because I could tell he wasn't concerned with kissing ass or wherever else. And he wasn't really concerned with the dinner. He was like drawing little portraits under the table on the tablecloth and like throwing them at people. And like, and he was just in his own zone, like a creative zone. And he was just chatting with people, including me. And what I watched him like doodling under the table, and all the fancy people sort of then want to kiss up to him. They were like eating it up. And I thought to myself, this guy is going to be a superstar, And one of my only references for art was I had seen the Jeffrey Wright, Julian Schnabel Basquiat movie. And I was like, this guy's gonna be, and I had thoughts like, because I'm always trying to figure out systems, but I didn't have much to go on. But I thought a thought which maybe was correct, which is I thought, how many really famous Black American artists are there? Almost none. Right. You know what I mean? And I'm like, there's Basquiat, and I think I went home and Googled like famous Black artists, and there's like one. You know what I mean? So I was like, how could there be one? You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy. And I'm like, well, this guy is showing at a big gallery. His art's really good in my opinion, even though I didn't know anything, but I'm like, I like it. And I can see all these people treating him like he's about to be a superstar. This guy's gonna be a superstar. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm like, I should buy one of these paintings while I can, because how does it make sense that he's older than me? I realized in retrospect, what's crazy? How much older Basquiat would be than Henry Taylor if he was still alive?
No.
Henry Taylor's older than Basquiat. Basquiat was alive, he'd be a dude. He just died at 27. Right. But Henry Taylor's, been making art, now for longer than Basquiat was ever making art. Right. I mean, not to compare those two people just because, whatever. But I was just like, how is this guy not a world famous household name? He's really good. And, so those are the kind of criterion that I was thinking of, where I was like, this painting's great. And I just thought to myself, honestly, I can't afford how it was way too much money for, in retrospect, I told a couple people as I was buying that, they were like, how are you buying that? You don't have the money like that, and I was like, no, trust me. It's not just good, it's going to be a good investment. Right. And they were like, but you don't know anything. And I'm like, no, trust me, it's going to be a good investment. And in retrospect, they're right. I didn't know anything, but yeah, it's, that's the paintings right there. And it's, and you know what, I had no basis for thinking that, but a lot of the things that I guessed on blind luck turned out to sort of end up happening. He had many museum shows. This painting was been in all the museum shows, right. And it'll end up being both something I love, and I think a really good long-term investment too. Not because I was calculating X's and O's that I would have even known anything about at the time, but because I thought, if I'm going to put all this money into something that I can't really afford, I hope it's valuable in the future because it's good, and I think it is valuable in the future because it's good. Yeah. Anyway, so what am I thinking about now? Is that where the next? Sorry, that was a long-winded.
No, I appreciate it. Because there's a couple things there, but now, having the knowledge and have the experience with how you wade through this world, have the conversations. Have you developed? You mentioned systems. Have you developed some sort of criteria?
Yeah.
Systems by which you approach this world.
I mean, I'd say I'm looking at a lot. There are almost two things happening side by side. I'm just looking at tons of art now in person, and I think everything that if anyone who's watching who's like, how can I learn about art, or especially learn about collecting art, the one obvious truism that's true is it's really the more you look at art, especially all kinds of art, not just the most current shows, but if you go to museums, if you go to auction houses, if you go to see things past and present, and especially things that are being sold past and present, and try to understand, like I know that some like old school collectors will, how they bring their kids around. I've heard a couple like old school legendary collectors, they'll bring their next generation and they walk into a gallery show and play the game of, if you could keep one of these artworks, which would it be? But I think it's even interesting to do that even with auctions and look at the the high stakes, like and low stakes, but also the like even like looking at the Klimts that Ronald Lauder's collection, think about which one you'd buy and why, and what should be worth what based on its significance. So a lot of what I'm doing is just looking at a ton of art. I'm looking at a ton of art online. I'm traveling to see a bunch of art. I'm going to lots of shows in New York, all the obvious things.
Right.
But I'd say things I'm doing are less obvious. I spend a lot of time just thinking about it myself in relation to, thinking about what makes a really great work by a particular artist. Because some of what I'm trying to do isn't just like, I feel like one of the most important things is not just collect the artist that you love, but collect the artworks that you love, like in the sense that that's, it's, and not just check off the boxes, say, I like Ken Price, I have a Ken Price, but really what makes a great Ken Price, what are the really, good works. And some of that is I'm thinking in my head and doing comparisons. I'm doing a lot of talking to people and getting their opinion. I'm always trying to kind of broaden my group of friends where we're sharing ideas about what we look at. And I need to say most everything I know about, there's some times where I just look at something and think, wow, this is great. But a lot of times it's because someone's told me about it, because I can't be everywhere. And I try to look at everything, but really it helps to have, in a weird way, I have a team of people. They don't work for me. We kind of work for each other. We're each other's eyes,
Art consigliors.
Yeah, we share each other's, right? Like we share each other's, and I love that, and I have friends, like I have a friend in London. I've told him about a lot of stuff happening here, and he's told me about at least as much happening in London, and it's really been useful for both of us, and I've learned a lot from him. But also I'm looking at data a lot, and it's one of the things that I say is like, if you're going to buy art, especially at any level where the price point is meaningful for you, it's different for everyone, But some people $1,000 is a life-changing amount, but for most anyone, $500,000 or $1 million is a real amount.
Yeah.
So if anyone's telling you buy stuff for $1 million, but don't think about the data, I would disagree. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
I think you should learn what you can. And so, for example, recently, do you know this company, Arthur Analytics?
Yep.
I go through and I use their you can sort by go in within artist and search so for example, I would just just today. What they call in poker, we call a thinly veiled brag post. The Met just hung and announced their gift of a Mohammed Sami painting that is now on display in the new hang of the Met with Katie Noland and Phil Guston and whatever, and Mohammed Sami. And he's an artist that I really like. I bought work by. I gave that painting to the Met. That's the thinly veiled. That's the thinly veiled brag. But why I'm thinking about it is I think it's interesting. What makes an artist have a strong okay, he's really good. He's really good because, in my opinion, just because I look at the artworks and think they're great. But also I think he's an artist who's really worth collecting, even as the prices get higher. Why? Well, for example, it's a rare situation where, one of the things you see in art markets is everyone sort of thinks something's great at a certain price. There are all kinds of artists, of all types everywhere, even in people's homes out in the street, where I'd buy an artwork for $5, okay, but then 5,000, what about 50,000? As the prices get higher, you start to see who really believes.
Right.
And a lot of times, there's even not just about people buying the new artworks, even the people that already own them. A lot of what happens is the galleries or the auctions or both start putting the prices up because they're like, hey, this artist is amazing. Let's just keep putting up the prices. But as the prices go up, a lot of people own them are like, I don't know if I still want to have this now that it's $500,000. I think I'd rather have $500,000 than this.
Right.
And that brings up a whole other topic about who's allowed to resell art. We could talk about that later or whatever. But to me, what's really interesting is which are the rare times where, because most of the time what happens is well, most artists, the prices never go up. But then the rare times where artists gets really hot, the prices start going up. Most of what happens then is as the prices go up, a lot of people sell, the prices kind of wash out back down, and then maybe sometime later they go back up. And that's another type of thing I often am looking for. Like you have artists where they've survived being the hot artist of the moment, and then they're still going along making great work and even maybe have another moment or many moments.
Right.
That's an amazing sign of a great artist and a great career. Is if an artist.
Jeff Koons right now. Have you seen that Gogh show?
Jeff Koons is having another moment. I think about this with Cecily Brown, whose paintings behind us. She's someone who was like the hottest artist in the late '90s, and she's still one of the. She's been kind of like in and out of favor with critics, with this and that, but she's having as great career as ever, and it's not her first moment in the spotlight. So that's a big sign that she's to me, that she's not just that her work can withstand the test of time, but that the artist, because it's hard to be like in music too and everything, and as an actor to be you're the star, you're on that cover of every magazine, and then next year no one wants to cast you in a movie. Who can really
mentally withstand that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the people that do, they're some of the great ones, why was I saying that? But so for example, Mohammed Sami, it's an interesting one because he suddenly was a big museum and market star. He had a whole solo show at the Blenheim Palace. He was nominated for the Turner Prize. He's in all kinds of another museum show at a museum in England that I'm forgetting the name of. Right. All of a sudden, he's like the rare moment where the paintings are beautiful and collectors love them, but also curatorially important and in museums. And so, of course, the prices went crazy. There was a painting that sold for whatever it was, $1 million, almost $1 million at auction. And then normally what happens next is everyone sells theirs because they're like, damn, I like this, but not at $1 million. And in his case, what's cool, I was just messing around with this Arthur Analytics. I went in Mohammed Sami page because I was like, this is crazy. You see in his graphs, highest price achieved, no sales. So it's a rare time where like the highest price ever happened, but no one thought, well, now I should get out, which is, a way of looking at data and knowing I can't ask every person who bought an artwork what they think of it. And even if I did, I'm not sure they'd be honest with me. Right. But it's a time where data almost speaks more strongly than than conversation, because it's a show of great love for the artworks that each of those people, some of them paid $30,000. Now their paintings are worth $1 million, and they still don't want to sell them. Right. That means they love them, and so that's kind of what. So those are the ways that I use data, that I'll like open this app and dig through it. But it's also something I think of conceptually. Even when I talk to artists will say to me, man, okay, my works, I'm starting to be really in demand. A lot of people, but people tell me like, be careful, because there are a lot of like bad people that bad actors that collect art. There's some like flippers out there, but like, you're my friend, you're one of the good people, whatever. And I want to keep out the bad people. How do I make art? How do I make it so that people like won't resell my work and stuff? And the first thing I say is, I'm like, it's important to say, I don't believe in that divide. I don't think that's true. You know what I mean? I think that that this, like I was saying before, the divide between people that are into art for money and into art for love is a false divide. I think that in a way, most of the people that collect art early on are by definition speculating. Right. Because what they're speculating on is everyone, even people that are multi-billionaires that at least say that would never sell anything, although other people do sell things too. But even someone, maybe you found the one person who never sell anything, but they're still speculating on, they want to catch the thing before it's exciting. They're by definition speculating on what's going to be the hot next thing. Right. They love the feeling of being like, oh, Mark Rochon? I bought that before anyone hit. He was still making signs back in, whatever. He was doing sign painting. He had running his own gallery, and I bought one for $4,000. Now, true, at the time I was worth $100 billion, but I bought one for $4,000 before anyone. They love that. That's speculation.
Exactly.
So anyway, so what I say is like, there's no divide, but I'm like, if you want to make artwork, I'm like, hey, check it out. I found the solution. I've cracked it. I can tell you exactly how, and I've seen it happen in real life in my own house, how you can make something that's foolproof from someone selling it. Okay, check it out. I bought this Henry Taylor painting. I've had it for years and years. The gallery that showed it isn't even open anymore. Mm-hmm. I could sell it any day now, and people have asked me multiple times, hey, would you sell that for $1 million? And I haven't. You know why? Because I love it. You got to just make art that people love, and then they want to keep it. There's no contract, there's no trick, there's no like Jedi mind trick you can play to trick someone into liking something that they don't want. At the end of the day, I don't think people should buy stuff they don't love just to sell it the next day from a gallery if it can negatively affect an artist's career. But at the end of the day, years later, after someone has something, if they don't really like it that much, they might sell it and buy something else, just like anyone would do with anything else. But the more that they feel, I'd say, not just a connection with the work, but I'd say also like, I feel a connection with this, not just with the quality of this painting and the greatness of the artist, both of which I believe in, but also this painting sort of been a part of my life. I feel a connection to it. It's lived with me, and it's meaningful to me, not, where even the way that another painting that I've lived with for the years might not have been, because there's something about this painting and even like the words that it says on it, the image, I feel a connection with it. It's part of my my life, and I feel a connection with the artist. I like him personally. He's always been kind to me, so that's one more reason why, it hasn't been my first thought to trade it for money. But if it was something that, someone owns that they don't have a connection with and they don't like, they might trade it for money. And you just see, that's part of what's fun to look at the data. You can see which artists, as the prices rise, people feel a deep connection with and keep it, and which artists, in the end, maybe a lot of the people that bought it were, say, it wasn't that they were just like, I'm going to use this as a cold financial instrument to speculate, but maybe they were sort of caught up in some kind of trend, and they were like, oh, I got to be part of this trend and catch it. Oh, I got to catch it before whatever. But then when the trend's over, they look and they think, I never really felt any real connection to this. And that's real. And I think a lot of art, if I'm being honest, partly, I'll try to use concrete examples. This might antagonize someone, but, for example, like, I don't know, take two great artists, legendary, or like, I think, Henry Taylor is now a legendary artist. He's been in shows, whatever, but also I feel connection with him and his making of this painting. But say, for example, a Damien Hirst spot painting made by a team of assistants, doesn't make Damien Hirst any less great of an artist. But if he asked someone, hey, why are you selling this? It was sort of made as a part of its logic is to be a cynically made product, and that's okay. That's part of, in a way, it's part of its concept, right. But it also means it's less connected to people's lives, yeah.
So we're talking about the market, right? Or the art industry as a market. Do you subscribe to that?
That everything's a market, or that there is a market?
That there is a market.
Yeah, for sure. And if anything, I'd say that one of the biggest challenges that art has now is that I'd say, full disclosure, I'm what in the past would have been described as a egalitarian, I don't know, I mean, like, anarchist or leftist. I'm, in a lot of ways, I'm not I'm, in terms of my beliefs in politics, I'm not a neoliberal market capitalist. I believe that actually more art should belong to more people. I think more art should belong to the public, and museums, more art should be, especially our greatest art, are the treasures of our society, should belong to the public, should be seen by the public. Things should be in museums. Things also should be, more artists should be funded by communities and the public. More of our taxpayer dollars, instead of going to missiles that we don't shoot, or planes that we don't fly, could go to funding artists to make art that could be beneficial to the public, like in public squares, and to be seen by everyone, not just in the vaults of a museum, but in more sculptors should be able to make big sculptures funded by the community for the community, so we can all live with art. That said, until there's a total change in society, for sure, a lot of these things exist in a market, and just denying it in your own head doesn't really help, so yeah, I mean, if anything, and I'd say art's an especially extreme example. It's a market-based, the business side of art is a market-based business, where a lot of people want to just be in some kind of like hypocritical denial about the existence of a market. Or what the joke I always say is, it's an industry populated with people where they hate the idea of anyone else talking about, or especially making money, but off of art, but they want to make as much money for themselves as possible in art. So, it is a market, whether or not anyone else wants to admit it, or whether they'd rather have it be a market for themselves, but not for someone else.
Right.
But yeah, for sure. For sure.
Cool. You bring up that story with Henry Taylor making you feel seen, right? At the table with the dinner with other high profile people. Who are some of the other artists along your journey that had that sort of care for you understanding this world that you were embarking on?
Huh. That's a good question. I'm trying to think of, there's so many people that I've met who are great, who I should give a shout out. Wow, where do I start? I mean, recently I've had a good, there are people that I've met, like I was just thinking of, I don't know why maybe this is the full other end of the spectrum. It's probably not a good answer to your question, but I had a fun experience recently with, because I've been doing more and more stuff with the Met. Am I wearing a Met hat? I'm not even wearing a Met hat, so really, but I like partly, I'll say as an example, the people at the Met, from my first friend at the Met, Hannah Howe, who's in charge of development and bringing in new people, who's an awesome person. And
yeah, she is. She's great.
Wonderful human being, and really good at her, by the exact definition of what she, rarely are people like it's her job to bring,
Fresh
people and
conversations, new people,
and funding.
Exactly.
And she does all of it amazingly well.
Yeah, she has that Venn diagram on her wall somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Figure it out.
Because it's also hard to I've never been a fundraiser for anything, and I don't envy fundraisers. So to be able to bring people in and funds into a museum and do it gracefully and in a way where everyone always feels appreciated and whatever is a really impressive skill. She's amazing at it, and just a great person. But anyway, but all the people that I've met at the Met, from the curators, Jane Panetta, David Breslin, Max Hollein, the people that run the Old Masters department. We have the European paintings. Even I've walked into the world of European paintings and knowing really nothing and being totally unqualified, and even the eminent chief curators, David Pullins, Stefan Molhijan, welcomed me in with open arms, even though anyone would have looked at me and thought I was out of place and useless, and clueless, all of which I was, So anyway, those people have been really really welcoming to me. And it's also worth noting for anyone watching out there, museums are great, man. Museums are they seem so intimidating, but if you can have someone just kind of walk you in the door, museums are made of people. I mean, that's just, the Met especially feels so intimidating. It's this giant thing, whatever. But but the Met is people, and the people are amazing. And if you, so it just takes that one, knowing that first person, and then once you see who's in there, it's often really kind, really welcoming people who want more people to be part of art. So why was I saying that? Oh, but this is actually sort of the opposite of.
But it was good. Because that was good to see those type of people. And the warmth within these, big buildings.
Yeah.
And now artists like Henry, are Henry's unique. He's great. He's amazing. If you hang out with him and have the pleasure of being in his presence, it's always a laugh. It's always a good time, and he always brings amazing energy. So you can see why he's a catalyst for people to come around his presence and his work. Are there other artists, that you've been around? And that you've collected, who've had that sort of inspiring presence?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why this is just because I was looking across in this apartment, but I was going to say I went to this event at the Met that was I didn't realize what kind of event it was, and so they said, hey, we'll see you at this event this evening, and I ran into Daron Langberg, who's an artist who I really like personally, and I really like his art, and he and Salman Tour, who's another artist who I really like, both personally and think is an amazing artist, are close friends. And so I saw Daron, and I said, are you going to the thing at the Met tonight? And bear in mind, he and Salman were the two newest artists to be part of the Met's permanent collection. So of course they're going to be there, right? And he was like, I didn't get invited. So I thought, oh shoot, man. I'm like, oh, yeah, no, whatever. And he was like, what is it? So I told him, and he said, I'm gonna ask Salman. Maybe Salman got invited. I don't think we got invited. So we texted Salman. He's like, no, we didn't get invited. So I'm like, so I looked and my thing said I could bring a +1. So I'm like, would you guys like to be my dates? So I brought them both to this event. And when I got there, I realized there were no other artists there. It was an event just for, honestly, I shouldn't have been there. It was all super high level donors. And me, I think because they were being nice because I had done a bit of being a donor just recently, but not at the, this was like really the big dogs.
Yeah.
So I brought them as my guests, and those are two guys who have been super kind to me, and I've learned a lot just from talking to them about art recently. They, I love asking artists what they think of other artists, and even maybe that's like bring the full spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Henry Taylor, I would ask him which other artists he liked. First, I would actually just ask him about other artists I like to see what he thinks. I could tell he was like, whatever. But I'm like, okay, who do you like? Who do you think is really good? And he said, you got to look at Noah Davis. And I never heard Noah Davis. But so he introduced me to Noah Davis at the time, just because he was like, that's who I think is good. And ditto, Salman Tour and Jennifer Packer, Salman Tour and Daron Langberg were talking about Jennifer Packer and how great like Daron and Jennifer Packer were in school together. And he said, man, she's just an incredible artist. And even from being in school with her, I knew, like we'd be in class and even the teachers would say, they'd be like, everyone would do critiques and they'd be like, I'm gonna be honest, you probably shouldn't even be here. You're like out of this world good, even in school, So it's like, I'd love to hear, so then I bought work by Jennifer Packer, kind of learning about her from them, and it was just generous of them to share what, who they think is great. And it's cool to know also, I think, because so much of art can set you up as if it's like a rivalry and everyone's kind of, initially I'd meet a lot of artists who I'd say like, hey, your work reminds me of so-and-so, and it would be someone who's a peer and they'd be like, that person, like, they're all right, but like, I'm like, why? Who do you remember? And they're like, well, I was thinking it's like Robert Rauschenberg and me, they were like, like it's hard to be compared to people that are your peers. So I feel like it's the ultimate sign of respect. Like, for example, that those guys were like, Jennifer Packer is really good. And in a way she's their peer. So it'd be easy to feel competitive with her, but they're like, we don't feel competitive. We just feel love and admiration for the amazing work she's doing. Right. That's I've loved learning that way from artists. And I've always, that's one of the first questions I ask artists, like, who do you like? Right. Who do you think is really good? Yeah.
So are there dealers who you're also learning from and help you with that same type of knowledge?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, gallery owners and private dealers, I really liked meeting some of the old school legendary dealer people. Like a year or two, I met a guy called Ivor Bracca, English guy, and he's just a brilliant, like, I've learned a lot from him just in the few conversations we've had, just in terms of how he thinks about and talks about art. He was one of the great collectors and dealers of a lot of the great British artists, Francis Bacon and Freud and Auerbach. But he also he's maybe I think I can relate to him because he's sort of he's a really non-traditional. He didn't have a gallery. He was sort of an outsider himself, right. But he's a generation older, so he's seen it all, and just has like unfiltered opinions about things. But yeah, I've along the way, I'm trying to think of great examples of something where I learned directly from. But yeah, I've learned a lot from gallery owners. Who's someone who I've learned a lot from talking about is someone who's really wise, is Ellie Rhines, who has 56 Henry Gallery. Right. She's both a friend, but also I don't think she realizes it. But every time I talk to her, I learn something just from how she's thinking about art and looking about which artists to show, but also thinking about art in general. She's a really brilliant person. And maybe actually what both of those people have in common, Ivor Bracca and Ellie Rhines, they maybe couldn't be more different. They're, however many years, 40 years apart and, whatever, English and American, different genders. But they're both people that, are people that are pure fun and just like both really throughout their lives know how to live in the moment and be and enjoy themselves and make other people feel at home and make a kind of loose, free, fun atmosphere. So but both of them, when it comes to art and their work, are incredibly focused, studious, knowledgeable. So it's, you think that you're one or the other. Either you're like a loose, fun guy who parties and has long hair and wears leather pants, and that means that you're just like a goofball when it comes to your work. But it's interesting to meet people who are like, who understand that art is meant to be fun. It's meant to be enjoyed, but also, when, for example, when Ellie Rhines is, in terms of, as a joke I always make with her is, I'm like, she's like in her free time, she's as fun and free as possible. But then like you think that, but she's like got the most rigorous program in terms of like what, I mean, she'd like, if I'd invite her to, a party, 4 hours away, she might show up. But if I suggested to show an artist that whatever, she wouldn't show anyone other than who she thinks is like the great, I mean, she doesn't mess around with her, because art is serious, and those are, I respect people like that who really, and also just really take tons of, both of those people have in common that they really eat, sleep, and breathe learning about art, old and new, different types of art. They're both just like constantly, their lives are one big learning experience about art. So it's why they're so knowledgeable. So it's fun to ask, just, those are the kind of people you have lunch with. I can't walk, even if I tried, I wouldn't be able to not learn something from someone like that that's so knowledgeable.
Yeah.
This is we're in the guest room. This is A.R. Penck from the late 70s, and I kind of like, also, like, full disclosure, I'm not a curator. I don't even play one on TV, but I wouldn't pretend to be. And all respect for the curators out there. But I like, in your own home, you can. That's one of the best parts about living with art, is you can move it around and mix things together. And sometimes I see connections that I didn't even know when I bought the art. So this is Penck from the 70s, and it's with David Rapinoe, who is a French illustrator. I like, by the way, speaking of people that break down boundaries, he's people will be like, illustration isn't fine art, and fine art is, he's shows at Gladstone Gallery, and yet his bio is just David Rapinoe is a French illustrator. He doesn't want to like, and no one's ever met him. No one's ever met him. Wow. Like even Gladstone's no one's ever met him. But anyway, so this is David Rapinoe, and this is Albert Olin. It's like a self-portrait. It's actually the kind of study for his most famous or most valuable self-portrait of him, like doing this thing. But in a way, I like the David Rapinoe that was made. This is what, in 1989. This is in 2024. But they're both kind of doing the same, like, whatever. And this is like an abstract A.R. Penck with his own language, but this person's also kind of doing, you know what I mean? They're kind of all, it's the same,
like the curation.
It's the curation, right? I'm like, and this is Carol Dunham, another one of my favorite artists. And even that, it's sort of like a close up of maybe a nipple, but it's also, the nipple is kind of in the same, it's all kind of the same. I guess there are only so many. And look, even this guy, he's even, look, this is Condorito. He's also kind of doing the same, same move. Anyway.
Nice.
Okay, what else we got?
Accessibility is important. You brought it up in different instances. The public having access, to museums, to shows, etc. Your social presence has risen, and the way in which you're being vocal about people having access, breaking down, the mystique around the art world and the myths. What would you say is one of the important myths that you've lifted the veil on within this arena?
That's a good question. I mean, there's so many.
Name several.
I mean, I'd love to say I've lifted the veil, but I think with a lot of these things, the veil is still it is still yet to be lifted, because there are a lot of things that I talk about, but that doesn't mean that they've changed. I'm trying, but I think it just in general. How do I say this? I think expertise is, on the one hand, art is something that we're all trying to learn more about, and there's endless to learn. So, for example, I meet someone who's a scholar of Japanese ceramics. I wouldn't pretend that I know more than them. If anything, all I want to do is learn from them on their topic of their expertise. And credentials are great, and even which I don't know what adding up your bio can be great, but it gets weird when people start to feel like they have to be someone important to be able to enter art. I think that's the main thing that I'm trying to change, is that, if someone wants to think that I'm legit because of XYZ on my resume, I'd almost rather counteract that, because it's, that's why I kind of push back when people are like, well, who are you to have a whatever? I'm like, I'm nobody, because I don't think you need to be someone to be. You need to, I wouldn't teach a class on, Greco-Roman sculpture until I know about it. But to be part of art, to buy something, I don't think you need to be an expert on it. You know what I'm saying? And if anything, like a lot of what I've learned fast, and I've learned from the experts. But then I became part of it. I'm not saying that I'm the expert on it, but in a way, things can intersect in a way that they often do in real life, where you can learn from, just think about it. It's like in sports, where like you might not be you're known for for dunking, you're not known for your jump shot,
Right.
but then you just, spend some time with Steve Kerr, and then you develop a jump shot, and then all of a sudden you've got a good jump shot too. You know what I'm saying? You're always kind of like, you have to throw yourself in the fire, and then so for me, I'd say it's important to people know that, one, that if anyone's making them feel like they can't start without already being an expert or already knowing all the right people, don't listen to them. You know what I'm saying? That's part of what I'm trying to do, is just welcome people in to be part of it at all levels, to start buying. You're not going to, you don't have to start tomorrow and be president of MoMA. That's not what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? But you don't need to be president of MoMA to buy an artwork, and I think maybe where my stuff comes in is that collecting art is a journey, and you can be collecting all through your journey. If anything, if you were at the end of the journey to have to start, that would be weird. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to be at the end of the journey to start, and even that's true of me within individual artists. Like, like, I don't know, what's, like, for example, this is a painting by Il Guercino, a Italian Baroque artist. Now, did I know anything about Il Guercino a week before I bought this painting? Absolutely not. So am I an expert on Italian Baroque painting? I'm not. But did I make, as it turns out in retrospect, one of the greatest collecting moves in the old masters field in the last year or two? I think I did. But it wasn't because I was an expert first. It's because some combination of I learned everything I could at the time based on the opportunity. Like, I thought, I'm going to maybe jump in, let me learn everything that I can. Then I asked people that were experts and learned from them, the real curators of the real museums, and I learned from them, just like you should be doing if you're getting into art. Learn from museum curators, learn from art advisors, from gallerists, from dealers, from artists. Like, for example, was I the greatest Noah Davis expert when I bought a Noah Davis? I wasn't. I didn't even know who Noah Davis was right before, but I asked Henry Taylor. He told me to check out Noah Davis.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
who would say, would you have to be I need to have written a book on Noah Davis before I bought the painting? I didn't have, you know what I mean? I asked Henry Taylor, he said, buy Noah Davis, and I liked it, so that's like, and so that's partly what I want to remind people is, you can trust it's about what you love, and it's about what you study, and you can build a great collection, doing research, teaching yourself, asking people, and then doing it, going with your gut, and letting yourself make mistakes. And ditto, it happens to me often. I don't know, like, this is probably embarrassing, but this happens relatively often. I'll buy something, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know anything about, like, right before, but then I learned everything I can. So, for example, I had, this is like a story I think of a bunch. I was having lunch with a guy, and he got a phone call from a guy who's a well-known dealer. And he got a phone call from another dealer, and he was just sitting there on the phone while we were sitting there at lunch, talking to this other person. I was just sitting there, like, listening to him. And he said, like, whoa, that's going to be big. The Leonor Fini estate will be with Casman. That'll be a big thing. They were talking about it.
Right.
And then he after a while, he got off the phone. And then I said, what was that? And he said, well, I was just talking about, like, some different artists changing. But I'm like, what did you say, Fini? And he said, Leonor Fini, she's like a dead, whatever. And I said, oh, good? He was like, it's pretty good. It's good. Yeah, it's good. I don't know. He's like, it's not your kind of thing, And I was like, because he was like, you collect, like, artists of right now. You don't collect like
Right.
dead women surrealists from from the mid-century. So, but he was like, it's really good. He was like, I think it'll be a thing once that they work with the estate. I was like, all right. Then I forgot about it. Then I saw in an auction catalog this painting that's hanging over the fireplace,
Right.
and I said, wow, I love that painting. That's the artist, I think. But the only thing is the auction was happening in 2 days. So I just taught myself everything I could in relation to that in the next like 18 hours. And then I bid on it and won, and in retrospect, I'm pretty sure, I mean, well, there's no ultimate judgment. It's always about your taste. But between the fact that I love it,
Yeah.
I'm ecstatic living with it. And let's be honest, part of it is now it's a couple years ago and we can tell it's already worth several times what I paid.
Mm-hmm.
I was not an expert when I bought it, but I made a great decision. You know what I mean? So it's like people should know, like you can dive in, and don't let anyone tell you that. And it's the same with maybe it's another thing about, I think all opinions of art are valid. Like when one of the reasons to dive in is that your beginner's mind is as valuable as expert's mind. It's just another perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So like hearing music or whatever, everyone knows in music, everyone's opinion is valid. Like no one's like, hey, what do you think of the song? Like if you're like, whatever, if you're Drake and you just made a song and you play it for someone and she's like, yeah, I wouldn't dance to that. Right. And he's like, well, no, but you understand the chordal structure of the minor harmonics and the whatever. She's like, yeah, no, I don't like it. You know what I mean? And that's opinion's valid too. You know what I'm saying? If you have to explain to someone, like, if you really understood the whatever, people's visceral opinion's valid, and whoever you are, your visceral opinion's valid, mm-hmm. and you want to back it up with learning and asking and studying, but you can jump in. Right. That's and you don't have to be always stacking credentials. So I'm even like hesitant to say when someone's like, who are you to be qualified to have these opinions? It's tough because the reality is, to be a critic for the New York Times, I'm not qualified. To be the president of the East Asian Ceramics Department at the Met, I'm not qualified. But to talk about a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, I'm as qualified as anyone in the world. Let's be honest. And because I really do live this, I live this stuff, and I buy it often with money that I can barely afford. I'm risking my last dollar over a decade in ways of just pure love and study and whatever, and it's working out. I don't know too many other people that are doing that, so I'm as qualified as anyone. But does that matter? Because at the beginning I was not qualified, mm-hmm. and it's good, and I'm glad I started. I'm glad I couldn't have waited till the end. I couldn't have waited to have those qualifications to start, right? Because
you'd never go in.
Yeah. So and maybe that's the simplest way to say it is. Like I always think of being in certain situations where I meet, like, I think I wrote about this in this article, but I was at my friend who's a kind of entrepreneur guy, he's like knows everyone in New York. He put together this dinner and it was all people who were like, oh, I just sold my kombucha company for 78 million or whatever. It was all like young people who were successful entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And they were like, Jeff's a big art collector. And they're like, whoa, dude, how many artworks? Do you have 3, 6? I was like, no, it's a lot more than that. And they were like, whoa, I could never, I don't have the money for that. And I was like, I think you do have the money for that. I don't know how to tell you that, And what's crazy is I was like, oh, are you not into art? And I remember one person was like, I like the Jack Whitten show. I'm like, oh, you're going to shows. They're going to stuff, but they just don't feel like they wouldn't know how to start. They don't feel like it could be for them. Even these people,
which is crazy because they're deep enough pocketed,
and they live in New York City, exactly. And they know people, and even they feel like they don't know how to jump in, or not that they don't know how to jump in, but that I guess the feeling is just a lot of people. It was me too. I felt like this couldn't be for me, right? I couldn't be one of these people. So maybe that's just something of what I want to show people is that I felt the same way, and here's my journey of doing it, starting knowing nothing, not being a big expert, and you should be able to be part of it too, whoever you are. Right. In my bedroom, it's the Ken Price sculpture. I guess I already said he's one of my favorite artists, but I think he's just a genius sculptor. And I've never touched one before. I went to, until many years later, and they're wild to touch because he sanded them, 100 times with surfboard material. So they're like a strange surface, like nothing I've ever touched. This is now Takahiro. He's another artist I really like. artist from LA, from Japan originally. He worked with Paul McCarthy. He's got his own. I like artists that find their own language. You know, that you look at their work and say, "Oh, this is a language that could really only be theirs," right? You know, it's kind of one of my very favorite artists in the world and favorite paintings in the world. That I guess it makes sense if I sleep under it. Salman Tour, who's painting The Vow. It's yeah, I don't know. He kind of hit on something where he can paint topical scenes like men getting married, and they feel also just like pure beauty and abstraction. He can paint very new. Their paintings feel really new, but they also feel really classic and timeless. They can live in like a really contemporary world, but also I feel like this feels at home with Vuillard and and whatever Baroque art and whatever, because he's in a way, I feel like it's some of the best art transcends any kind of trend or moment. It's just something, and I think he's that good, and also just a really lovely guy. This is a little Jennifer Packer chair, and yeah, I like also artists that can work really. I feel like she's got her style, and it's her, whether it's tiny or huge. There's there's like no one that paints like her.
So on that note, if I'm starting today and I'm like, hey Jeff, let's go for a drink or go for coffee or grab a bite, what would you say to me is the first place that I should start? I've been to a museum, don't understand how to get into a gallery.
Huh. Yeah, I'd say, I mean, do we know each other?
Yes. Like we at this point, we're like, we see each other a couple different places, and I'm like, I want to figure out how I should go about, in collecting in this space.
Because I would say the best is just, I would say I'm glad you know me, because let's come with me to, like, for example, I have a friend I just met recently, really nice guy. And yeah, he's young, but he just became really successful, and he wasn't sure how to even become part of this world. And I've said, come with me, next weekend when I go to an opening, come to, or, this, Saturday, I'm gonna go see a few gallery shows that I haven't seen before and meet the people that who have the galleries and so on, and come along with me and just kind of get to see how it works. Everything's so different between knowing one person and knowing no people. It's really hard when you don't know a single person. I feel that way even about traveling and stuff like that. Like going to like I just had a friend visit who lives in Beijing. He said, how come you've never been? Because I've never been to mainland China, which is embarrassing to say. I don't know why I've never been to mainland China. I always wanted to go, but I realized, he's like, you've never been to Beijing? But I realized partly it's that I don't know anyone in Beijing, but now I know him. So now actually we'll be able to go. Because I'm like, because if I'm just there by myself, it's one way, but just having a friend that can show you like where to go.
It's everything.
Yeah. And then I would say, yeah, come to galleries. And then I'd say, think about, what helped me is I didn't decide my budget when I started art. My budget decided me. You know what I'm saying? Because that was whether I wanted to have a different budget or not. That was the budget that I literally had. So I knew my budget. And then, but I'd say if you're someone who has more resource, decide your at least your like opening budget, and then think about just as a quest to see what you love, with the goal of fitting in your budget. So because there are a bunch of artists even now that are kind of my contemporaries that I don't really know anything about. And I'll be honest, it's because I can't afford it. So I never even learned it, because I'm trying to learn like what I can do, and I'm very action-based learner. If someone's like, what got me into, I wasn't learning about old master painting until a year or two ago, partly because even then, even 10 years into collecting, I had no idea that I could afford a good old master painting. And even now, there's still people out there that say, well, you can't really collect old masters because what you could buy is all just like bad quality stuff. All the good quality stuff is in museums. Nothing you buy would be able to buy museum quality work, whatever. And I never really thought about it, because I thought, well, anything good must be $500 million, and I can't possibly do that. So I only learned a couple years ago that everything I just said there was wrong. You can buy amazing old master painting and drawings for often the price of emerging art. And even like the last old master painting that I bought, when I pick it up, It's going to go directly to the walls of the Met. It's not just good enough to be in the Met. It will hang for the next 5 years in the walls of the Met, and it costs less than a lot of works of artists that are in their 20s and 30s, and it's a masterpiece painting from the 1500s. So anyway, why was I saying this? Oh, so I started learning about it based on the opportunity.
Right.
So ditto, I would say, start to figure out your budget and then start to learn about the things that you love that fit in your budget, and make a plan to, like, there's no point in learning if your budget, you're like, okay, my budget's 50 grand. Probably learning about Gerhard Richter abstracts as your focus is probably not the move. You know what I'm saying? But learning about, but thinking about even then, like, what great galleries, if someone was like, okay, my budget is only XYZ, I probably wouldn't send them to Gagosian. I'd send them to 56 Henry. I'd be like, you should meet 56 Henry. They have a great program. The owner of the gallery is someone I think is really brilliant. You should meet her and know that there's someone who shows great work within your budget. And you can look back in time. I think some of the people that have done the best collecting, and this is something that it's another, like, this may be a tangent, but it used to be, the answer to this question was, a lot of people built amazing collections by finding a gallery owner, gallerist,
Right.
that they trusted, and that person was their guidepost. And they did, so for example, I have a friend in LA who he met was Gavin Brown, and Gavin Brown was and is that dude. And if you had just met Gavin Brown at a certain time, he has like an amazing collection of Elizabeth Peyton and Peter Doig and whatever, all of which he bought, great Peter Doig painting for $4,000 because Gavin Brown was like, this is good, you should buy this, and he bought it. So you could trust the vision of one person. The sad thing is that's harder and harder because they're not as many gallerists left who really have a vision that even they would stick by. If we're being honest, things have been turned into, as everyone wants to have more spaces, more locations, more product, there are many more of galleries. If you even ask them, hey, what's happening in your third location? They would say, oh yeah, that's not any good, but we had to fill the spot, That was not how Gavin Brown was running his program, or how Leo Castelli was running his program, and even a previous generation. But if you're lucky enough to somehow link up with, usually it's smaller galleries where their whole program really is great, and that's maybe the way you could start, is get to know someone who really does have a great vision, and for the first part, work with them and their vision, and if it's one of the few people who you can trust to really, because in a way it's kind of this, it's always this strange, selling art and buying art is this strange relation of trust, right? Because the real question is, who has a fiduciary responsibility to who? Like when you go to is a gallery like a trusted confidant, or is a gallery like a clothing store? Because, that's, I think, one of the questions that's at stake right now. Because it used to be Leo Castelli, he was people's trusted source for art. He had his vision, and if you asked him, hey, why should I buy something from this gallery? He'd say, because this is the best art, I think, in the whole world. That's what I could buy. I could be wrong, but I really do think this is amazing, Whereas if you buy a pair of pants from a store or something, and you say afterwards, this isn't that great, you bought it. I don't, what I mean? We're just selling it, man. Like, we're trying to get rid of it. Yeah, we're trying to get rid of this stuff. You know what I mean? It's just product. Like, you buy the pants, like, it's not, we're not trying to say it's the best pants at all. Should have bought a Levi's pants. They make them, whatever. We just, like, why are our jeans that are of terrible quality cost 100 times more than a vintage pair of Levi's? I don't know. You're stuck with them. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of like, so that's that's really the question that's at stake in galleries. So I'd say, as long as there are at least some galleries in the world where it's their vision and it's a good vision and they're honest about it, they really believe in it, what they're showing, then I think you can trust those galleries.
Cool.
Right. This is, you can see I've just moved in, so I still have boxes and stuff. This is Mark Tansey, another one of my favorite artists. And as an example, I mean, there's so many things to say about this painting, including maybe it's on the wall crooked. I don't know. Does it look crooked?
No. I think,
as I look at it, I'm like, is it crooked?
No, it's pretty straight.
But it's sort of, it's called Repairing the Wheel, and it's he's really like a philosophical painter. It's a man, or maybe humanity, man, sort of walking. You see, he's kind of like he's in a ocean landscape, and he's almost making his way into the digital.
I was literally gonna say feels very tech here,
right?
It's
He's
like
kind of walking into he's being pulled into the world of tech, so it's sort of a cultural, political painting.
Yeah.
But I mean, to me, I think this is an amazing painting, but it's as an example of, you were talking about primary and secondary.
Yeah.
I bought this at Christie's auction house. And why would you say, if you love the artist, why not support his work? Well, because a painting like this from a gallery would be like a little more than 10 times what I paid for it at the auction, and an amount that I at least at the time and still now can't really afford to buy. So and at Christie's, it turned out I was the only. They opened it up. I'm like, how much is it going to sell for? They're like, we'll have lots of bids. Don't worry. I'm like, okay, because the estimate is really low. They say, okay, we're opening the auction. Ready? I'm like, bid. And they're like, okay. Yeah, no one else bid. You win. You know, whatever. So I'm like, so just because you just never know. One of the reasons to bid at auction is just the world. People are people. Everyone has, someone was asleep. Someone was, having a fight with their husband. Someone was, whatever. Someone was on vacation, and then all of a sudden it slipped through. And now I get to own an amazing work of art by one of the greatest living artists, I think, and afford it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to afford it. So,
you mentioned some secondary acquisitions, things that you were bidding on in the market. Talk to me about the way in which you look at primary and the way in which you look at secondary, and how your approach is or may differ.
That is a great question. I'm trying to think of how controversial I want to be, but I'd say that I love buying from. It's been a long time since I bought something directly from an artist, actually, but I don't think that's necessarily bad. But I love buying from galleries. I've bought from galleries as recently as this week. But I think that in general, one should buy from a gallery when there's an artwork that one likes and wants to buy, and you should buy from wherever. I mean, let's even zoom out more beyond galleries and beyond primary and secondary. I'm going to make the most obvious statement, which also might seem like a controversial statement. I think that people should buy art because they want to, of course, right? You should buy what you love and want to buy, it's super obvious, right? But in that, I'm also saying, and I think it's actually good when you buy art, in a way you're supporting art. You're supporting the whole ecosystem of art whenever you buy art, and that's good, because I think art is the fact that there's more money going into art leads to more support for art in general, for artists in general, for the people working in art in general, all the way across the board, not just from the top of the gallery world but from everyone stretching, shipping, handling art. Every time you decide to buy an artwork, it's great for art in general, and you are in some ways supporting art. But I don't actually think that you should buy a work of art just to support an artist. And I think that anyone who's telling you that is actually being disingenuous. Even if people say, oh, I buy art to support artists. No, you don't. You buy art because you want to, and then you want to be able to brag that you support artists. You buy art because, and there's easy way to tell. Those people don't buy art to support any artist or the artists that are most in need. If I'm like, hey, you should buy art by this homeless guy. He really needs it. Right. He needs your support. They're like, no, I want to buy the art that I'm going to put in my museum. So they're buying the art they think is good, but then they want to be able to say they support artists, which is great. They are supporting artists. But when it comes down to it, is I'm all the time buying art that is by an artist that's also shown by a gallery, and I buy it from auction. You know why? Because the artwork that I liked is in the auction. Right. That's why I wanted to buy it, and I don't think that I owe them anything in terms of like, should I pay 3 times the price to buy it from a gallery? Absolutely not. I don't believe in it. And partly why I think that isn't just because it's just obvious and true. It's another reason too, which is that one of the many things that holds people back from getting into art is that they feel like to start in art, they have to be some kind of great philanthropist. But for example, in music or movies or any of the other creative fields, you can get started in being not a maker, but a buyer, a consumer, a listener, a watcher. Right. And how do you start in the movies? By watching a movie. And how do you start by watching a movie? By watching whatever the hell you want. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? And there's an easy way to say where, so no one, so no one says and so in a way, actually, I was just talking about this with an artist who's become a good friend. She's someone who's a really good painter and really cool person. And she and her husband are both great artists, and I've become friends with both of them.
Mhm.
But I bought a painting of hers before I even ever met her or knew who she was. And if someone said to me, and she was saying like, yeah, I don't like the idea of talking about it as like, oh, you support this artist. Because for example, if someone said, oh, is a work of hers in your collection? And I'd say, yeah. And then they said, but she's your friend, right? So you did it to support her?
Mhm.
That's almost like demeaning to her. I'm like, no, I didn't do it to support her. I did it because she's amazing, an amazing artist, and I love that painting. Because it gets weird if you kind of bring some kind of issues of like a sort of paternalistic guilt into, because in a way that doesn't affect like no one. If I'm like, hey Sean, what do you listen to at home? And you're like, oh, I've been listening to Drake and the Rolling Stones and James Brown.
Yeah.
If I'm like, really? Rolling Stones? They're so rich, man. Why don't you listen to my cousin's music and support his art? You're like, because I want to listen to whatever I want to.
Right.
You know what I mean? It goes without saying that people just like partly why music can be for everyone and art feels like it's for almost no one is because in music you get to just like whatever you like, you know. And art, there's almost this feeling of like you can't like what you like, you can't consume what you want to consume.
Mhm.
You have to do it the right way, or you know, it has to be with this air of kind of paternalistic guilt. I don't believe in it, and I think it restricts people from coming in. I think I would tell anyone to come in. People are like, get into art and support an artist.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
I say get into art and love art. Love art and be, you should be in your house happy to be surrounded by the art that you really love. And if you're doing it, you're supporting a lot of art, but it should be first coming from your passions, your whatever, and you should be free to have whatever passions you want, not just in terms of who's supporting what, but or which galleries you're supporting, but also in terms of like, don't let anyone tell you if all the art you like is stuff that is considered, you know, whatever. I'm not a big like, I don't know what, like I've never been a big you know, like Mr. Brainwash guy.
Right.
But if that's what you love, that's what you love. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't let the art establishment tell you that Mr. Brainwash is in the, you know, whatever. Do what, you know, whatever you're into, because that lets more people come be part of it. And someone might start just by being, you know, like I always think of that place in Miami where you pass during Art Basel and they have all the people with a velvet rope on the street outside the Alec Monopoly thing.
yeah.
And there's always people like having champagne and they're the biggest douchebags ever. And everyone laughs at them. But I'm like, don't laugh at those people. Some of those people, they're going to start there, but
They'll make their way into the convention center.
or wherever. That's their journey. You know what I'm saying? It's
Right.
like, you know, and there's, you know, and taste is always evolving and it's your taste. And you just, you know, it's like whoever. So, so it's all to say, like, I love, I have some great relationships with galleries where they're really deep relationships and we're become really good friends. And we come through, we have done a lot with and for each other,
Mhm.
you know. But I will say also that, you know, if the traditional gallery model is part of the contract between gallery and buyer,
Mhm.
goes as follows. You as the buyer are supposed to do everything for the gallery, do it exactly in the ways that they want, support the whole program, buy things that you don't even necessarily want to buy, you know, show up to all the things, give your time, your money, even buy things from the gallery that you could buy for more affordably elsewhere, and so on, whatever. And in exchange, the gallery offers you nothing. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's I think that's something that's obviously going to change because that's just you know, you know, there's going to be, and I always think about my you know, even the kind of thing where it's a constant you know, that they call it like a beauty contest.
Yeah.
To show that you're the most important, to get deserving, to get to buy the stuff.
Mhm.
It just at a certain point, it's like people are fed up with it. They're tired of, to have a genuine, it's one thing to have a deep, like there are galleries that I've bought from for years. We know each other, we trust each other. We've found a deep relationship. So they, you know, offer me artworks that they might have not offered someone else because we have a great relationship. But if it's something where just everyone just shows up and has to say like, no, I'm extremely important, I'm on the board of 6 museums or whatever, everyone's tired of it. It's like, it's over. You know, there's no, you know, why was I saying that? Oh, and I always think of through multiple romantic relationships. But I remember the first one where my girlfriend at the time, she really knew a lot about art, more than I did, and had great instinct for art, was really knowledgeable and whatever. But she didn't understand. she understands the wrong word. She didn't like the customs. She understood them, but she didn't like the customs of the art world. And she was right. Like she'd be like, so what are we doing Thursday? And I said, oh, we have to go to this gallery dinner.
Yeah.
And she said, do you want to go? And I said, no, I don't really want to go. She said, is it going to be fun? It's not going to be fun. Are these people your friends? They're not really my friends, so why do we have to go? I guess I'm going because I'm hoping that if I show up, they might choose me to get to give them 100,000 US dollars. And she said, what? You know what I mean? Like, so we have to go. And she said, I have to come too to go impress these people that you don't even like. So they might think you're worthy of you getting to give them money in this beauty contest. And meanwhile, she's thinking about her own life. She just makes money for her things that she does. People just pay her money for her great work. Right. And so it's like a little bit like even sort of pathetic. Like, why am I, this is a, like, and so I'm just so stubborn or self-motivated or crazy that I kept coming back. But a lot of people don't come back. I mean, that's the thing that sort of, they bump into a world where they say, oh, I love the show. Oh, but everything is for the most important people. Mm-hmm. And they say, well, great.
Feel the friction.
I'm done. You know what I mean? That's, and so that's, I think, one of the things that'll change too. Because just it's gotta change. I can't break down those walls all myself. I mean, there's no way. Just as one person, I wish I could like lift the veil and then it's all gone. Right. But it just bit by bit, you'll see that and also I think maybe one last thought, which is that people have talked a bunch about how it's changing from a sort of item economy to an experience economy, mm-hmm. where it used to be people wanted to have things like handbags, and now they want to have, or luxury watches, and now they want to have experiences like floor seats to a NBA game or Super Bowl or whatever, or whatever. And so the art version of that is that it's less about owning art and more about buying into being a VIP to a program. People want to just like spend a lot so they can feel like I'm a mega gallery VIP and I got invited to dinner. Right. If you're watching this, no, it's not. It's not. They're lying to you. It's not, because art's not about getting invited to a dinner. It's just not. And the dinners aren't that good anyway. The dinners are better. The best dinners are with your friends, with the people. Art is about art. And the best feeling about art, and the thing about art is that and I said this in my art news article, and I saw some people write like, what do you mean? What, like, how could this be true? Isn't this the opposite? And what I said was that even the biggest artists that are the most brand names, especially galleries aren't a brand name the way that that Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Ferrari are. And here's why. How you know is that even though Gagosian or David Zwirner might have a big elaborate dinner, and then at their opening, you have, it's incredible. You want to be the one who's chosen to get the best work from the Hauser and Wirth show. It's so, you're like, feel so special. I'm a big VIP. And I was there, and they even sat me next to the, whatever. And I feel so important. And that's my experience. But what the difference is when you drive a Ferrari off the lot, the next day or a year from now, everyone's like, damn, that's a Ferrari. It's looks like a Ferrari. It is a Ferrari. But when you drive your artwork off the lot and it's in your house, it's not a Gagosian. Mm-hmm. It's a whatever it is. Right. It doesn't matter where you bought it from. And no one knows that you were at the dinner. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no clout. There's no later clout. The only clout is in getting to learn about and live with art that you love. That's not even about clout. It's actually just an amazing, joyous pleasure, but like, and the stories are sometimes fun. But at the end of the day, it's like, a painting, whether I bought it at Christie's on the phone, bidding with someone, or, was chosen by the Sultan of Brunei to have it with his blessing. No one knows after. It's just a painting. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, so that's, I think it's really important to remember, is that the status games aren't what it's about, no matter what anyone tells you. They're just status games, and they're not even, how do I put it? They're not even very long-lasting status games, because they don't, no one can even see the status later. So even if your goal was to flex a particular type of status, the only flex is having a great art collection. Right. There's no other flex. You know what I mean? Like, where you got it from doesn't matter. And you can see that even one of the things that's amazing, just like a little spoiler, for example, what's amazing is to look sometimes at the homes of, apropos of answer of your auction or whatever, little insight, look sometimes at the homes of some of the great dealers, gallery owners and stuff. Sometimes the gallery owners that have the best collections, and I'm talking about a few people in particular who own mega galleries and stuff, and you look at the art that's on their wall, even by artists they represent, and they bought the works from auctions.
Right.
Because that was the best place to buy that work, or the only place to buy that work.
Mm-hmm.
That really incredible painting. It didn't matter what the delivery mechanisms don't matter. What matters is now it's 18 years later. I looked up and I'm like, whoa, he bought that at Sotheby's, you know? But really all that matters is he has an incredible painting in his house. No one's thinking about what show it was in or what, whatever. So anyway, that's another bit of advice is don't let the status games keep you out. But even once you're in, don't let anyone fool you into thinking that some kind of like status that happens in a moment, even though we're all part of the art ecosystem and critics and collectors and museum curators and whatever make up all of it, at the end of the day, what makes a great museum is the art that it has in it. What makes a great curator is the art that they curate. What makes a great collector is the art that's in their collection. It's about the art, and it's all like, I'm trying to figure out lots of opinions and ideas and knowledge and history from different people. But why I'm trying to do it all is to discover and get great art. That's the thing. And behind you is Barbara Kruger, another one of my favorite artists from the 80s. I should say I love the 80s. I love the great artists of the 80s, and maybe it's like a sync of all the things that if you're asking kind of like philosophy of or criterion for collecting. It's something. Should I be in the shot? I'm like kind of. But in terms of like criterion for collecting, because what I'd say is it's a combination of everything. These are the artists from the 80s that I love. I guess Tansy was in the 80s too, and 90s and whatever. But the artists that I love that got their big start in the 80s or their break. First of all, I just think those are amazing artists. Mm-hmm. Second of all, it has something to do with my story where like I was born in the 80s. This was kind of like the formative, like the New York 80s feels like how I came up in the like world that I knew at the beginning of my life. So it feels, I don't know what the word is, I feel a personal connection to it. Yeah. But then the third reason is I think the artists from the 80s that are great, like Barbara Kruger, like Mark Tansey, like Francesco Clemente, artists that they're not from the 80s, but they started in the 80s, I wouldn't want to group them all, they'd all be like, I'm not from the 80s, they're all alive, I'm saying? They're all from right now, But they started, artists that started in the 80s. What I think they all have in common is, unlike the artists that started in, say, the 50s, like de Kooning, Pollock, the giants of the 50s and 60s are like I love de Kooning and I love Barbara Kruger. Right. But the only difference is this is a great, original, unique Barbara Kruger from the 80s, and I was able to afford it. Whereas de Kooning, a great de Kooning from the 50s, I cannot afford it. Right. So partly what I love about the 80s is that it's the last decade left where some of the giants of the period
you can still acquire.
You know what I mean? So it's like, that's just an example of like, look where if you're starting out, look at the periods, types, movements, galleries, anything where you find something you like and you can be part of it. Right.
So people are important, and osmosis is also a great conversation. Osmosis and the way in which information passes through is key. And you brought up that conversation regarding the Leonardo Fini, and because you were sitting down where you were having that conversation, your receptors were like, oh, I can move on this information. Tell me the importance of information and how you curate the network of people you're around and how that impacts, acquisition.
Yeah, it's everything. I mean, because it's just, people forget that everyone finds out about something from someone. I think it's easy also, this is true in music and it's true in art. People will say like, okay, now everyone's heard of me because I'm featured on a Drake song, but where were all of you before then, huh? Where were all of you? It's like, dude, we hadn't heard of you. How were we going to hear of you? You know what I'm saying? Like, we all hear of you from something, and so it's sort of like, so it's worth remembering that, to be humble enough to be always receiving, because that's how no one's just born knowing, and was I born knowing who Bryce Martin was? Of course not. I had to know about it from somebody, So yeah, I mean, I guess maybe I don't know if this is the right answer, but the way that I'm bringing on people is by reaching out to them. Mm-hmm. and by being humble. I mean, I think that that's what's weird is that, and it's another thing I think that can be misleading. Everything about art, it's a lot of like big personalities, big egos, brash statements. When you meet a lot of people, especially people who are from like multi-generational collecting families, who, all they want to say is they're like, oh, the late Picasso is terrible, and this is, whatever, and only the this and that is whatever. They know everything about everything, whatever. This is an early period surrealist painting, but really the late was much more, they know everything just in some phrase, and they're just ready. They just know everything, but in a way that limits their ability to learn, so I'd say and also it's confusing because it's set up to be a world where everyone has to try to be a bigger dog than they are. Right. So you're like, hi, I'm just writing you. I'm interested in the Sean Green show. Is there anything available by Sean Green? And the response is, well, we're trying to place it to very important collections. What is in your collection? Why are you important enough? And so it gets people thinking, why am I important? I know everything about everything, and I'm the biggest, I'm so important and wealthy and relevant and whatever. You have to flex your credentials, which is silly because what served me really well, I think, is that if I think about it, especially people like museum curators and stuff have been generous with me with their knowledge, because I say to them, I'm not an expert. I'd love to learn from you. I appreciate what you're doing greatly. I'm but a humble student at your genuinely, not in like a fake way, but just like, it'd be cool to learn from you because, especially in fields like, Italian Baroque painting, I'm like, every sentence of every conversation we have, I'm learning something. Thank you. That's so kind of you to teach me. I'd love to learn more. So I think that some of it is I'm just developing my network by asking questions and not assuming I know the answers.
So we like to have some fun to close out our conversations, and I take from the hip hop world where we're like top 5 that are alive, and would love to know who are your top 5 artists that are alive.
So maybe I'll do top 5 artists that I've encountered in my own, whatever. Yeah. Wow. I mean, as I said, that I actually had an answer ready. Whoa. Or how about I'll make it artists that have been.
It could be top 5 acquisitions of this year.
Or even things that really had a big impact on me along the way. Yeah. Like, for example, I'll put Ken Price in there because he's someone that I loved his art. And I didn't know, it was the first show I ever went to where I went to his show at LACMA, never heard of the artist, never seen an artwork, and it blew my mind, and it really got me more into collecting because I just was amazed that there could be something like this. Also, just the objects were so weird. There were objects like this that it's kind of blowing my mind that it could be art. So that's something that I just saw and fell in love with and admired the artist ever since. What else another artist I really love? Maybe I'll keep it in different fields, not just painting and sculpture. Yeah. I love Carrie Mae Weems. That's another thing. I didn't know who she was. I was just walking by really early on in my life, and I saw a piece from the Kitchen Table series, yes. And I was like, this is incredible. Something that I just, it stops you in your...
That series is amazing, by the way. Yeah.
It's like, was great then, and same with Ken Price. They're both things that I loved then and I love now. I mean, I'm going to put Diego Rivera on there. I love Diego Rivera, and he's been kind of big. Oh, I should mention I'm doing a project in Mexico City that opens in February. Yes. I open Public Art Collection, and it'll feature a painting by Diego Rivera that means a lot to me, and that has a lot of history, including a lot of, he was the second artist ever to have a show at MoMA, and Matisse, and then Rivera, and this was in that show. It was in the Met, it was in all the shows after, in SF MoMA and Crystal Bridges, and now it'll be at my place, Cuernavaca Trace, next year. So he's an artist I've always loved, and I think is important to into to me.
When's the space open?
February
February.
during Sonomaka week.
Okay.
Let me put how many am I on? 3 now?
Or 4. 3? 3? Okay, 3.
How about Francis Picabia? I love Picabia.
Right.
And maybe well, I'll put him and Philip Guston in the same, because one of the things I love about them, and one of my favorite things, I mean, I love both of their arts and their art. Anyway, I love both of. Anyway, is in in many ways, but two of the things that I love is that they both weren't. Didn't feel stuck in one style. They were constantly evolving and even making art that almost looked like it was by a different artist and not being stuck in a signature style. And another one of my favorite things about the world of art in general, being an artist, but also all parts of art, is that when you're 40, 50, 60, 70, you're not too old.
Right.
And so I love the artists that found their own, both like Picabia was at his best and his weirdest late in his life. He let himself, people always are like, oh, when I was young and free. I'm like, you can be old and free, you could be old and weird, and I love artists that got weird when they're old and made their best work.
Yeah.
And who should I put last? I should put one living artist, huh? How about one? Because it's all been dead people. So, oh no, Carrie Mae Weems is alive. But how about someone else alive that means a lot to me? I love Lisa Yuskavage. She's a painter that I think is amazing.
Lisa's great.
And she. And I mean, I think that maybe I'm interested in her in part just aside from how great of a painter she is.
Mm-hmm.
She's
also a great person, like human.
See, I've never met her personally, but we're Instagram friends. One day I'll meet her.
She's incredible.
I heard she's and
she invited me to her dinner at David's Werner years ago. Didn't know who I was, what I was doing. So I had to tell her, and she was like, "You should come to the dinner." And I was like, "Wow!" Like from nothing, and that. For her to just reach out and do that meant a lot. It still has impact on me like today.
And those are the kind of people, man, the people that are like use their success and fame to be generous and, instead of to be, something else. And yeah, and even I think in her art and from what I understand about her practice and her life outside of her art, she's sort of challenging and breaking down barriers that have to do with class and about who belongs and even what kind of images belong in art and like whose bodies and also what's beautiful and what's crass, what's but also just kind of like giving a big like middle finger to the kind of hierarchies of social class and sort of refinement. I think there's some part of me that wants to be crude on purpose, especially in fancy settings around the art, because I'm just a guy, It's what wants me to bring out more of my I feel almost the opposite reaction when someone's like, "Are you important and civilized enough to be here?" I'm like, "Nope, I'm just a bald guy from Boston who, doesn't know anything." You know what I'm saying? And I feel some of that spirit, in the paintings of Lisa Yuskavage. That's maybe why I like them so much. Is she's just like, I'd rather just say fuck you and throw it in your face, and that about what's supposed to be belong in fine art. I like that.
Yeah, cool. I appreciate that. Thanks for going on that journey with me and pulling out some showstoppers in terms of like, those who you value, those who you appreciate, those you got in the collection. Lastly, if you were to host a dinner with a music artist and a visual artist, who would they be and what would you serve?
What I serve? I mean, I always think, especially if we're gonna have dinner and not just like putting them in the Hall of Fame, but we're actually gonna hang out.
Yeah.
Then I would want to put people that have big and appealing and interesting personalities. Yeah. Not just as artists but as people.
Right.
And I almost just think maybe that's aside from, I'd say in my project, whatever it is in terms of having to do with media and art, some of what I'm trying to do is just make art accessible to more people.
Yeah.
But also, I'd say I never thought of it this way, but I'm maybe trying to bring personality back or more. I like spit as I said that. I made someone or bring personality back. Drooling as I said. But I'm trying to bring, you know, and like let. I mean, obviously, there are lots of great personalities who are people who are artists and so on and so on. But still, a lot of how the media around art exists is not a lot. Is not to me enough. Doesn't have enough
Right.
human personality and style and you know. People's imperfections and weirdness and everything that comes with being a real person. So I'm trying to think of who I'd. Okay, wait, musician first and then artist. Okay, musician. I have Nina Simone, a big personality,
Yeah.
big personality, amazing musician, but also like really big personality, personally, politically. I bet you'd be an interesting conversation. Oh, and I know. Okay, Nina Simone and Francis Bacon. Another big personality.
Okay.
You know, and I'd say Francis Bacon is someone. I mean, obviously, I never met him, but he was one of the first artists I should have put him on my 5 list. I love Francis Bacon,
Yeah.
and he was one of the first artists that I went to MoMA. I saw a painting of his, and I stood and looked at it for hours. I love Francis Bacon, and then I read his interviews with David Sylvester, and he just seems like a guy who, aside from having a really interesting life and big, wild, painful, weird life. He also just, both in a lot of different ways, you know, Nina Simone and Francis Bacon, the artists, have a lot of big ideas in their art, but also they just were people who, in words, shared lots of powerful ideas.
Yeah.
You know, I've learned a ton from. I recommend to anyone watching, get the book of. I think it's called The Brutality of Fact, and it's interviews with David Sylvester and Francis Bacon, and I've underlined and tore out sheet. It's, you know, still I think of different things he said in it, and one of them is this idea. Sylvester asks him why he doesn't usually paint more than one figure, and why it's usually one figure, and he says it's because when you see 2 figures, your mind goes to some kind of explanation, like, oh, she's his sister, and then, you know, maybe you're trying to understand in a formal way, in a deeper, in a logical way, the relationship between the 2 people. But if he wants his paintings as much as possible to be no explanation, just like a direct hit to the nervous system, like you look at it and it's just in your vein, like you know, like you just feel that that shock with no explanation. And if someone would ask you why you like it, I don't know if I like it. I just feel something, you know. And to me, I love art like that. I almost think of it's the same with music. I almost think if they're ways of dividing scopes of music. Yeah. Some music is meant to score film or be background music. That's great. But I've always liked the music that's just you know, the people that when they take the microphone, you stop what you're doing and you just like, whoa, you know what I mean? And that's how I feel about Francis Bacon too. Yeah.
Cool. I appreciate that. Well, thank you for letting me into your home and giving me insight into who you are. More insight. We've been friends for a while, but like it's good to understand the way in which you've gone about entering this space and continue to share this space with others. So I appreciate that. And this is our first one in New York. So
yeah. And can I say before we cut, my turn to say to you, I love everything you're doing, and especially it's great that you're expanding into this world where you're bringing the public into people's homes, but you're doing a big thing for bringing art to more people, and for that, we appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for doing it.
Thank you. Yeah.